and structural assessment service for home and business owners impacted by tunnelling for the WestConnex project. The report should detail how the service could be provided on a cost recovery basis. Internal legal advice will be sought when drafting this report to determine if there are legal and/or administrative barriers to Council's involvement into the dilapidation reporting process. Point 6. That Council commit to ongoing coordination of and support for the work of the WestConnex Community Liaison Committee in order to allow for the transparent flow of information between Council and the various WestConnex community groups. And I would like to thank those members of the gallery in attendance tonight who have been participating in what I understand has been a very effective committee. Point 7, that Council state its preference for advocacy regarding WestConnex not to be outsourced to advertising agencies or external contractors and instead be conducted through Council's WestConnex unit. Point 8, that Council commit to always undertaking interrogation and analysis of Sydney Motorway Corporation traffic modelling to fully understand impacts of traffic flows on surface emissions and stack emissions in the Inner West Council area. Point 9, that Council complete independent traffic modelling in affected areas to understand potential air quality impacts of induced traffic at interchanges and potential rat runs throughout the Council area, noting that some of this work is already underway. Point 10, that Council, wherever possible, identify specific impacts and issues relating to the construction phase and suggest improvements that could strengthen approval conditions and enforcement actions to address these long-term cumulative impacts. These should be articulated in Council's EIS response, drawing from the lessons learned in the design, approval and construction of stages 1 and 2. Point 11, that Council establish within Council a log of complaints register and a process whereby residents within the Council area can log a copy of complaints.
Point of order, Mayor, I can't hear you.
Sorry.
Unfortunately, we can.
Sorry, thank you for that, Councillor Drury.
I genuinely could not hear you. There was murmur occurring in the gallery that was preventing me from hearing your dulcet tones.
There's not long to go. I think it's important to articulate all of this, so I'll expedite it. You can hear me? Excellent. Wouldn't want you to miss out. Point 11. Well, it's just that the councillors did ask for an adjournment because it's a detailed motion. I'm trying to be transparent and make sure that all of the information is fully understood. If Councillor Porteous would prefer that I discontinue it, I'm happy to. Okay, I'll continue. No objection? No problem. That Council establish within Council a log of complaints register and a process whereby residents within the Council area can log a copy of complaints made to Sydney Motorway Corporation and state agencies in response to construction conditions, so that Council may make additional representation on behalf of residents to relevant state agencies and ministers. This should include dedicated contact numbers made available to residents to easily log complaints. Point 12. Produce a report for consideration by councillors about how the existing plans for WestConnex detrimentally impact on potential public transport options, such as the White Bay Light Rail extension and the Sydney Metro West, and major transport arteries such as Parramatta Road and Victoria Road. The report should also assess alternative proposals, including the City of Sydney's alternative plans. Point 13, that Council oppose, in principle, the City of Sydney's proposal for 13,000 units to be built at the site of the St Peters interchange, noting that this would be a greater increase in residential density than is proposed in total for the Inner West Council area through the government's Sydenham to Bankstown rezoning proposals. And 14, that Council dedicate an officer within the WestConnex unit to A, support and assist the work of the various action groups, acknowledging proliferation and complexity of issues associated with the WestConnex project and the need for dedicated local support within the Inner West Council area to focus on issues specific to the M4-M5 link and interchanges. B, the responsibilities of this position should include support for and facilitation of community responses to planning and design documents, facilitation of a log of complaints by residents, and support for Council's advocacy on behalf of the Inner West community to relevant state agencies and ministers. I'm not going to address the motion now because I've spoken for quite long enough, I'm sure, and I think it's fairly self-evident what the objective of the resolution is. I will maintain my right of reply subsequently. I would like to, before going to the gallery, which I will do, I would like to express, I'm sure on behalf of all of the newly elected councillors, the gratitude that we feel towards the public servants. who have continued to undertake the important scrutiny and policy analysis of the WestConnex project and to advocate for local residents in a very industrious and serious manner throughout the period of administration. I know I speak for everybody here when I say that we really appreciate your hard work and dedication. Now, there's the motion before us. I'll open up to discussion from the gallery before I go to councillors. Yes, sir, please come forward.
Mr Mayor, can I just ask a quick question before we start discussion?
Absolutely.
And that is that we refer to a range of reports there that are in council's hands at the moment. Have any of these been made public, or are they going to be in the near future? Thank you.
I'll put that question to the Deputy General Manager.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The various reports, as they become available, will be made available publicly on the website and to councillors.
Could I get a couple of questions as well?
For specificity about the timeline for when they'll be available.
Thank you, Councillor Smalls. Could you identify which ones in particular?
Look, the range of reports, we've requested a range of activities to be done, expert opinions and advice here. So a range of reports have been done. Can you outline for us which ones have been completed and how soon we might expect to see those as councillors and also to the public? Thank you.
Most pertinently, the EIS assessment.
Yeah, look, the EIS assessment is underway. It's still in draft form. Working, and I realise that it's Monday week, so there's not, you know,
I'll call the meeting to order. I really object to politicians being howled down or interjected upon. I object to public servants being interfered with in that way even more so. Please let him be heard. I would expect that every councillor here would adhere to the principle that we'll have public servants treated with respect while they're conducting their business. I'll ask that the public servants be heard in silence. I think that's a fair request. Please proceed.
We'll be doing a presentation with our consultants tomorrow night at the public meeting, although that the Deputy General Manager will be giving the presentation, but the issues as they're raised will be addressed by ourselves and by staff and the consultants. There's also the briefing on Thursday night where we'll be taking councillors through the main points in the submission. But in terms of council seeing a draft, it would be at the next point, which I think is the 12th of October, which I think is is that an ordinary meeting of council? Yeah, the ordinary meeting of council.
And can I further clarify, I think it's pertinent to John's request for information, is the intended process that a submission, which will have input from the community, will be submitted before the deadline, which we disagree with that deadline, and then subsequent to that, an amended submission, which includes the resolutions of the council on the 24th of October, will also be submitted?
That's right. And from talking to my City of Sydney colleagues today, that's the way the city's going with their submission, and I think that would be the right way to go, because I realise there's a lot of input that needs to be had from the councillors, and yeah, there's just the time is the main issue. So it would be good to have that councillor input, and that's a process we've run with quite a few of our submissions and former Mayoral submissions, which I've run with over the years, is lodging a submission and then putting in a late addendum, if that's what you'd like to call it, that raises particularly all the councillors' issues.
Now, we've got the gentleman from the gallery. I can ask him to sit down if you prefer, but my intention was to conduct the proceedings in a way in which we would hear from the residents who are here to speak, and then we would come to the councillors for comment, clarification, etc. Would you prefer me to ask him to sit down?
I think it's important that we get the clarifications first.
Would you mind grabbing a seat, sir, and I'll come fird to you when we go to the gallery?
Speaking in a more
no
informed
problem.
manner.
Of course.
Yeah.
Sorry, sir. Sorry about the confusion. Councillor
Not a problem.
So I'd ask through the chair to the acting general manager. In terms of the monies that have so far been expended on the EIS assessment by council, I note that there is just one sum really that has been expended, which is the $125,000 to Becker Consultants. I'd ask that you outline exactly what that covers in terms of specialist consultant work that'll be done, and what else is being proposed beyond that in terms of specialist consultant work on the EIS that is identified as other areas that need to be addressed.
Yeah, that Becker Australia are covering every chapter of the EIS, so it's a holistic assessment, and there are no other, at this stage, no other consultants commissioned to look at specialist topics. There's also input from staff as well.
However, was there a particular reason that we didn't engage, for example, consultants on areas like health, wellbeing, community impact, noise issues? We seem to have not engaged a number of different consultants on a number of different areas, which we would normally have consult the specialist work on. And I note that there was an allocation of $250,000 which was made by the administrator in a public meeting to spend on the EIS assessment, of which only $165,000 has been spent, and I'm wondering why the underspend on the EIS assessment when we only have one bite of the cherry here.
Yeah, look,
I'll put that as a question to the relevant officer. That's okay.
Yeah.
Please proceed.
Sorry. Yeah, look, to answer your first question, having 30 chapters, I guess we could engage specialists to analyse any one of those, and it would be good to get the guidance of councillors to know which ones are important. And I was speaking to the consultants this morning about engaging a health specialist, and they've lined one up at Newcastle who's not working for WestConnex, and that's one of our issues. There are so many consultants already working for WestConnex. So, yes, we can take on board some of those extra studies, but we need to be guided as to which ones are important, because there are potentially 30-odd areas. And yes, there's a slight overspend on the 250 for the traffic modelling study, but yes, there are spare funds in the EIS assessment fund, and I guess we thought it would be good to have a contingency, I guess, for things like you're describing.
Okay, thank you for that.
Just one other clarification. So I understand that you will be bringing a draft submission to the 12th of October meeting and then a final submission to the 24th of October meeting. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'll put that as a question to the relevant officer.
Yes, that's correct.
And on that basis, can I ask that the Mayor consider adding to his mayoral minute that the draft submission be brought to the 12th of October meeting and a final submission be brought to the 24th of October meeting?
You've just received an assurance from the council officer that they're preparing to do that.
Yeah, I was asking the Mayor if the Mayor would consider adding that to his mayoral minute.
I don't consider that an officer of this council would lie to a meeting such as this about whether the report was being prepared, and it will be there on the 12th of October. Councillor De Cruz.
Point of order, Mayor. I was not implying that the officer was lying. Just as you previously moved a motion where we opposed WestConnex, that is already a standing position of the Inner West Council. We endorsed the standing position of the Inner West Council. It's a normal practice to also endorse where there's been a information that's provided that is important.
Very clearly into
so I think
proposal of amendments.
No, but I think for you to insinuate that I am implying that the council officer is lying is
that wasn't my intention.
No, but that's exactly the words that you used.
Do you think we could get on
so
with the
I would
business
ask,
of hearing
so
from
I would
people in the
ask,
gallery?
so I'd ask that you withdraw that comment, because that was certainly not my intention.
I apologise that
Thank
it was
you.
interpreted that way. I would like to get to hearing from the members of the gallery. Councillor De Cruz has some questions first.
Yeah, I just wondered if you could make available to councillors the brief you've provided to the consultants. Oh, sorry, through the chair.
I'll put that to the relevant officer.
Yes, that can be done.
When?
Oh, as soon
Today?
as
Yeah.
I can do it, yeah.
Yeah. And further, what was the timeline in that brief?
I'll put that to the
Sorry,
relevant officer.
Chair.
You need to direct the question through the chair.
Through
It's
the
a
chair.
procedural thing.
Yes, I'd need to look through our files and give you that. But the draft report from the consultant was given to us on Wednesday last week.
No, I'm actually sorry, through the chair. What was actually in the brief and the timeline for that and the payment schedules associated? So what was the contract with the consultant for the evaluation of the EIS?
I'll put that as a question to the relevant officer.
To just basically describe the brief, it outlined the areas to be covered, the total budget, and the timeline has, I think, based on us trying to assess when council meetings fall and different things, the timeline has altered slightly, but it was basically enough time to give the consultants to do their work, mainly.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sorry, the reason I'm asking for the brief is we need to know earlier than later what aspects are not being addressed and covered in the assessment and what the capabilities are of the consultants you've hired.
Okay, well, the brief will be forwarded to councillors tomorrow. Are there any further questions of the council officers before we go to the gallery? Yes, Councillor Lockie.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is a question for the council officers or for you, Mayor. On point 14 about dedicating an officer within the WestConnex Unit 2, I'm wondering whether this is anticipated to be an additional resource to the No WestConnex Community Organiser that we will be speaking about later tonight, or if you're anticipating that this would, in effect, replace council's funding for that
Given this
community
is not a
organiser.
point of clarification from council officers, I'll happily address it once we've heard from members of the gallery.
Okay.
Okay, please proceed, sir.
My name is Lyle Kennedy, a resident of Haberfield and a former councillor on Ashfield Council.
Welcome.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to... Former mayor, okay. I'd just like to congratulate all councillors on getting elected to council, and I hope you have a very productive 3 years, though going on what's happened in the first meeting, I've got some concerns. I came here tonight with the expectation of hearing a discussion on 4 motions that were placed for an extraordinary meeting, and I was surprised that when we arrived here that there was 2 other motions which were mayoral minutes. And I wanted to talk about WestConnex, but unfortunately I'm going to have to spend some of my time talking about process. The Department of Local Government's meeting practice note at 2.7.1, titled What is a Mayoral Minute, concludes, mayoral minutes should not be used to introduce, without notice, matters that are routine, not urgent, or need research or a lot of consideration by the councillors before coming to a decision. These types of matters would be better placed on the agenda with the usual period of notice being given to the councillors. I'm sorry, Mayor, but I think that your mayoral minutes are obfuscating the situation, and I'm concerned that your criticism of the state government and WestConnex for their lack of transparency is being demonstrated here tonight, which the gallery knows. We've experienced obfuscation and lack of transparency from WestConnex and the state government, and I would hope that you would not do the same. In light of the fact that you yourself said that this was a very complex matter and needed further consideration, I would respectfully request that you withdraw this motion and hear the 4 motions that are on the business paper, and if there's time and need, we can then come back to your mayoral minute.
I won't be doing that, but I respect your brain as a tactician, and the Greens would much better having you on the council than not.
So turning now to
The substance of the policy, please do.
I'm just wanting to get some clarification on the mayoral minute, and I just need to understand, if it is passed as it is, will it negate all or parts of the substantive motions that were meant to be the topic of discussion tonight. Are you able to respond to that?
If you have a question, I'm happy to address it in my right of reply, but it won't be an interrogation. It's not set an estimate, sir.
Okay, and then also, I would like to understand, in your reply, I'd like you to mention, is the mayoral minute in conflict with any of the substantive motions? So I would like you to consider that. Having said all that, I now would also respectfully request that you consider amending your mayoral minute, given that you are not prepared to withdraw it, particularly replacing clause 14, dedicate an officer with WestConnex Unit 2, with the wording in motion 2 of the motions that were tabled and discussed noted by everybody.
Your time has expired, sir.
Move an extension time.
I'm happy to accept the motion for an extension of time, but I'll just make this point. If you're the first person to address an item, of course there's a temptation to go over time, but if you're the last person to get out of here tonight who has to sit around for several hours in order to be heard, it is good practice, and I would respectfully request that, where possible, everybody stick to time. Now, there's a motion to extend the time by 1 minute? 2 minutes.
You're wasting time.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Please proceed.
So I respectfully request that you consider amending your mayoral minute by deleting clause 14 and replacing it with motions 2, 3 and 4 of the substantive motions before the committee. And I'd also like to say that, yes, I'm concerned that we're here very late tonight. I didn't realise that we would have to sit through you reading through your mayoral minute when it should not. When it should have been submitted in time, and it clearly is not urgent. It's on top of four existing motions. It's not an urgent motion. It took quite a lot of consideration, and I think it's an abuse of your authority as mayor and power.
It's not urgent. I do wonder why we have an extraordinary meeting tonight, but that's fine. Next contribution from the gallery. Please come forward. Yes, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would also like to express my disappointment at the collection of thoughts in your mayoral minute. I'd like to speak against it. None of those address the issues that are so important in the environmental impact statement, and the fact that the council's response on this is due in 2 weeks' time. None of your points address the issue that it is incumbent on council to be able to fully understand and object to the likely impacts of this project. The Stage 3 EIS does not contain sufficient detail in order for council to be able to do that. So what council needs to be doing is to object to the lack of detail. All of the reports and notations that you referred to in your minute have already been carried out. There's nothing new there. I think it's really important to note that the detail in the Rozelle interchange section is so limited that the government has had to extend the timeline because it can't find interested bidders for the construction contract. There is nothing in your minute that deals with the lack of detail, which seems to me, if you don't have sufficient information, how can a proper assessment of impacts be made? I also want to underscore the previous speaker's suggestion that item 14 of your mayoral minute be deleted and replaced with the motions that were previously put to this meeting by the Greens councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please come forward.
Good evening. As before, Catherine Gamble from Leichhardt. I too am disappointed with the tenor of this meeting, Mayor. Your mayoral minute comes across as a power play rather than a good faith attempt to set out your opposition to the project. I wish Mayoral Minute 1 had gone into the same amount of detail as Mayoral Minute 2. How are you going to oppose the project? Because we're none the wiser tonight. There's a lot to deal with in Mayoral Minute 2, and I'm concerned that by supporting it, that there's things that we're missing out on. There's so much in this EIS which has very bad impacts for the community. What I would actually call on the councillors to do is to lobby the local government minister and lobby Anthony Roberts, the planning minister, for an extension, given the extenuating circumstances that this council finds itself in. And can we please adopt a more collaborative, productive approach rather than these stupid games that we're seeing tonight in council?
Further contributions from the gallery? Yes, please come forward.
I'm just wondering why, Mayor, you chose to collaborate with the two Liberals rather than with all the Greens. Oh, sorry, my name's Amelina Wallace and I'm from Erskineville. I'm just wondering why you formed an alliance with the Liberals who support WestConnex instead of all of the other councillors who got elected who are opposed.
But Councillor Lockie can tell you about the 20 phone calls she made to Councillor Passis last week, if you like.
No, I'm asking you.
Order. That's uncalled for and untrue.
Well,
yeah, rather than
your supporter who you've lined up to come up and say.
No. I want a response from you about yourself and why you did that, because that's on the record and it's all happened.
Okay, I'll just make this point. I understand. I'm not quite as unpopular as some people in this room might think, as my primary vote in Balmain Ward would suggest. I understand that there are a number of you who are here because you are political opponents of mine and you don't agree with my conduct on most occasions. That is not relevant to the debate that we are conducting here. And so I'm going to ask respectfully that the people who come to address the meeting next address the substance of the policy and try not to go over ground which has already been addressed by the other very eloquent speakers. Councillor Passis.
I would just, here we go. Now, I would just like to make a statement. If the gallery would like to have a look at my phone records, Councillor Lockie said it wasn't true. She didn't ring me on numerous occasions. My phone is available to anybody that wants to look at it. I do not tell lies.
I'll ask the meeting.
My phone is available.
I am shocked.
My phone is available because I don't think councillors should mislead and say that it's not true when it is true. I did not raise it. I sat here, I did not say Councillor Lockie rang me on numerous occasions. It was raised and then the answer was it's not true. My phone is available to all who wants to look at the records.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to ask all of us to make an effort to get back onto the agenda of the meeting. We've got a motion before us. Is there anyone else from the meeting who would like to address the substance of the motion? Yes, please come forward.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Fesky. I'm a long-term resident of Newtown. I've got a few problems with motion 2 as it now stands. And I'm really disappointed that there's such a focus on amelioration and not against sort of strong advocacy against WestConnex. I just want to state that. But my concerns with motion 2 have to do with the lack of detail about a number of issues. First of all, the lack of resources. How will these proposals be resourced? Will it be that the already extended council staff will be asked to take on extra duties for these new roles that are being established? In which case, what sort of confidence will that inspire in the residents that this is a serious attempt to work to improve things for them? The other relates to, I'm part of Newtown Residents Against WestConnex, and we've done quite a lot of work around potential structural damage to houses, residents' houses, and also heritage buildings in Newtown. The EIS overlooked Newtown in talking about damage to properties and heritage issues and all of that. And just looking at item number 5, which talks about producing a report investigating the potential to initiate a dilapidation and structural assessment service. You know, that's sort of like three removes in a way from actually coming out in with a clear policy about how residents' rights, if the stage 3 goes ahead, are going to be protected. The EIS equivocates enormously, and also nowhere is it stated or nowhere is it acknowledged there or anywhere in here that I can see that a simple dilapidation report at the start of construction, the end of construction, it absolutely fails to take into account all the evidence that we have been presented by various tunnelling experts and other people, and which we're also denied access to geophysical reports by Sydney Motorway Corporation, which they say are in confidence, with damage that can sometimes only occur, you know, be evident months or years after the construction is in fact finished. And if you look at large sort of tunnelling exercises all around the country, you find that residents have enormous difficulty months and years later, first of all, trying to find who to take to court, then putting themselves through this really complex process. And I see this as something that is left out of every single report that we're being asked to comment on. Yeah. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say.
Well said. Thank you. So I've got Anne, Christina and Nathan.
Sorry, I hadn't realised I was so well known already to Mr. Byrne that he knew my name,
I have
which
seen
is
you at a few
Anne.
meetings over the years.
Which is Anne rather than Anna. Look,
I said Anne.
no, I beg your pardon.
That's okay. Please proceed.
This rather long motion you put in number 2 looks in fact as if it's actually comprehensive. In fact, it's not. And it seems to me that it actually addresses issues at a very general level, which reminds me not a little of the EIS itself. The problem we face as residents in the area, and I speak as a resident in St Peters, is that the detail in the EIS is so limited because it is not based on any actual plans that in fact it makes it extremely difficult for members of the public to respond to it. That's why we look to the council to produce a comprehensive critique of what is actually been going on with this statement. I do not see this in this document. And that's why there is a great deal of concern about making sure that the public gets to see what the council is considering and what the council actually puts in its draft response to the EIS, so we can ensure that the things that we are most worried about are addressed. Now, from the outset, we know full well that the government intends to sell this project. The previous speaker, Mayoral, actually identified one of the key things that is very worrying to people who are already pursuing the government in relation to compensation or chasing them for who is actually responsible for damage to properties. Once the thing is actually sold, it will be very nearly impossible to actually identify who will be the party that is liable for any kind of damage which happens to people's properties. Now, this is not just a matter of whether you can sell it or not. This is a matter of what you can live in. And given that down at our end of the council area, the very neglected area of St Peters, not only are we looking at the impacts of the WestConnex project, we are also looking at the impacts of the Sydney Metro, which has just recently established a very large construction site alongside the railway line. Now, we are going to have great fun trying to work out who is responsible for whatever damage actually occurs in that area. Never mind all the other impacts from the construction that is going to be going on for absolutely untold years. Now, this is why we're concerned about the references to things like the stacks and the air pollution, and the fact that there is no heading even that actually says we are concerned about the health impacts. Now, as someone who's lived in St Peters for over 30 years and has had to put up with the dust and the pollution in that area all of that time, I can also say categorically it is worse now than it has ever been. Now, this is why we are coming to you as the council to say we need the maximum scrutiny, the maximum critique from this council that basically goes to the government and says, this is inadequate. So it is not a matter of looking at things that you can ameliorate.
Sorry.
I'm not a councillor, I'm sorry.
No, I'm not referring to you. Councillor Kiat has moved an extension of time of 1 minute, seconded by Councillor Hesse, 2 minutes. Seconded by Councillor Hesse. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Declare that carried. Please proceed.
The council needs to go back to planning and say that, frankly, that this statement is a disgrace. It should never have been issued in the state that it is, and that they should return to the proponent to say that they need to, in fact, to redraft the entire thing based on actual consideration of real plans. The thing that is concerning the residents of our area and all the people that use the area from the point of view of business is that once the thing is sold, it will be very nearly impossible to find out what the construction plans are, what their impact are, and how to deal with them locally. And you, the council, will be in as bad a position as we are. And that's why it seems to me that rather than play the wretched games that have been going on this evening, we should be discussing the substantive questions of what we actually do about it. Now, one of the few points in this thing that I actually agree with is the demand that we try and get from the state government the preferred infrastructure report for stage 3. That is a critical document which must be in public hands, but there's not much point to actually issuing that after the EIS exhibition period is closed and public comment is no longer accepted. So the very minimum that should be asked by the council is an extension of the exhibition period, an insistence that it be extended, and an insistence that the preferred infrastructure report be made public before the exhibition closes. As a very minimum, I ask you to consider that as an urgent matter.
Thank you for that. I just seek clarification from the Deputy General Manager about what representations have been made by Council to the government requesting an extension of the exhibition period.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Prior to the re-election of the councillors, the administrator has sent a letter to the department requesting an extension. A reply was received from the department that an extension would not be granted. Subsequently, a letter has been sent to the department in response to a motion from the most recent council meeting. We've not received a reply yet.
Could I just ask for a clarification when that was sent, please?
I'll put that as a question to the relevant officer.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. That was sent today.
Sorry, can you just repeat that?
That was sent today.
Today. So, sorry, that was a motion that was moved on the 21st of September, and I called up the Department of Planning to ask what response there was to it, and they said they couldn't find it, which is when I then sent an email to yourself, Acting GM, asking why they couldn't find the letter from the Mayor and the General Manager asking for an extension of time. So I'm assuming that after that you then sent the letter off, is that correct?
I'm Councillor Porteous.
I think it's a reasonable question to ask.
Gary, I know it's your practice.
No, I think it's a reasonable question to ask. This is almost 2 weeks. This is critical that we get the extension of time, and we're now being told that the letter was sent today. I think it's a reasonable question to ask.
The Council has made 2 submissions to the government asking for an extension of time. To pretend that it's the fault of the officers instead of Gladys Berejiklian is ridiculous.
No, I actually think it's your fault.
Of course.
Because you're the... No, I think it is your fault. No, because the motion that was moved after the mayoral election as an urgent motion was that the Mayor and the General Manager write urgently.
Meeting for 2 minutes.
Write urgently, Mayor, and it's now.
The meeting is adjourned for 2 minutes or return at 7:30. Okay, well, there's 8 councillors, so we have a quorum, so we'll resume the meeting. Further contributions from the gallery. That was very witty repose. Well done. Christina, over to you.
Is everyone?
There's still some councillors absent, but we have a quorum. Please proceed.
Is everyone ready?
We're ready.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I must say, though, that it's now over 2 hours into the meeting and we are yet to start discussing the extraordinary motions which brought us here tonight. Since we've been sitting here, we've been lectured by you about respect and treating people appropriately. Well, Mr. Mayor, I'll tell you what respect is. Respect is having the courtesy to put a detailed motion on the internet at least 1 or 2 days before so that we have a chance to read it. That is respect. So do not come here tonight and tell us that we are not showing respect. We are here on our own time. No one is paying us. We're not with our family. Some of us had to leave work early to be here. So you need to be showing us the respect that we are due. And when it comes to this motion, I certainly am not prepared to support it as drafted. Is it intended to be a comprehensive statement of future actions by the Inner West Council? Who knows? I don't appreciate it having it read to me as though I'm 5 years old either. That was condescending, unnecessary and a time-wasting activity on your part. The only part of this motion that I would be prepared to support at this point in time is amending item 14 to pick up motions 2, 3 and 4 of the extraordinary council meeting. As other speakers have stated, it's very, very important that we have proper funding for this position. We don't want to place more pressure on the Inner West Council staff. We haven't been given any details around the funding of this additional position, if it is indeed an additional position. Furthermore, I would like to support the statements by Ms Gemmell and others as to the need for urgent intervention to obtain an extension of time for this council to submit its EIS response. The EIS document is 7,500 pages long. We are now less than 2 weeks out of the closure date. The group's resources are stretched at the moment. We are trying desperately to put together responses that are relevant to our areas. It's absolutely imperative that we are all given access to this draft as soon as possible, and we urge you to make that draft available to the members of the public and not just the councillors as soon as possible.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'll seek clarification from council officers, but it was my resolution at the last council meeting to require that that draft report be made publicly available, not just made publicly available, but sent around to all the action groups for input prior to the next council meeting. Can I confirm whether, through the Deputy General Manager, whether that is going to occur?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor, that it will occur.
Okay, thank you for that. Further contributions from the gallery? Sorry, that's right, we had an order. My mistake. Please come forward, Mr English.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
I couldn't recall Anne's last name, but I'm happy to refer to everybody by their title if you'd prefer. Yes. Please proceed. Well, if you come forward and announce yourselves, then I'll be able to do that. I'm not a mind reader. Please proceed, sir.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Nathan English from Balmain, co-convener of Eco Transit Sydney as well. I would like to support everybody that's spoken so far in everything that they've tried to express. There is one particular issue that I'm quite passionate about, and I'd like to give I will say this one thing for the Mayor in writing this document. I had a conversation with him on the telephone during the election campaign where I asked him if he could take some action to try and reserve corridors in the Roselle goods yards, and credit to you that you've put it in writing in this document. Yeah, thank you very much. It needed to be said. I don't know if it's on any official council documents from Leichhardt previous, and it does need to go into the future. However, I would like to tweak it slightly. So I'm talking about section 1 of the motion, part F, need for quality design and full delivery of Roselle Rail Yards recreation area. One concern I have with this entire document, the way it's written, is it does almost come across as if WestConnex is happening. And I think that...
I'll ask the councillors to desist. Please proceed, sir.
Well, Councillor Drury, as much as your interjections tonight have not only demeaned your own position as much as your respect for the community, I would point out to you that stage 3 has not...
Sorry, Mr English. I've asked the councillor to desist from his interjection. I'm not going to allow you to launch a diatribe against him. You're very articulate. Please proceed with your position.
Stage 3 is not underway yet, and it's stage 3 that this EIS deals with. Whilst there are shock and awe effects happening all over, like in Euston Road, where they cut down trees before they had permission, and various other things that are taking place to give the impression that WestConnex is taking place, and clearly that works for you. It is not happening without any approval as yet, and it is this council's position to put its EIS in before that approval can take place. So it's not going ahead just yet, and this community and everybody in this gallery, I believe, is here tonight to make sure that we give the strongest stand we can that this excuse for an EIS, because that's really what it is It is not actually an EIS document. For example, the traffic modelling is highly flawed and dependent on unconstrained models, which means that the traffic constantly is expected to flow at a regular rate, no matter what happens, whether there's a car breakdown or whatever. That's not taken into account. It is also modelled as if every single aspect of WestConnex or adjoining motorways that have been projected by this government have also been built. That is not going to be the case. So the traffic modelling is highly flawed. The air quality projections are highly flawed because they're based on the traffic modelling, which is unconstrained, which does not indicate the pollution levels when the cars will be stalling.
An extension of time has been moved by Councillor Hesse, seconded by Councillor Stamoulis. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Please proceed.
Thank you. The alternatives have not been discussed in any shape or form as far as public transport measures are concerned. That is something that this council should be advocating for strongly before it is happy to accept any position on WestConnex and suggest that it is going ahead. The future corridors that you've talked about, Mr. Mayor, in section F of 1 have not yet been defined. So it's a bit of it's a statement which needs clarification. And what I would suggest is that we say transport corridors should be decided first through the Rosal Guzyard site before the WestConnex project is approved. That is something that should come first. It should actually come before even recreational uses because the recreational uses will take many years to take place because it is actually going to be a construction site. The metro comes after WestConnex as well, and there's a very good chance that that site will continue to be used for construction of that as well. I support everything that everybody else has said. Section 12 talks about producing a report for consideration by councillors about the existing plans for WestConnex detrimentally impacting and the potential of public transport options. The potential public transport options are not necessarily on the radar for Transport for New South Wales right now. So the idea that a report can be produced is flawed in its thinking. We actually need to define as a council, with our local know-how, what would work for us as far as public transport corridors are concerned. And I would point to the work of Eco Transit Sydney and Jamie Parker, our MP, who has been advocating for that corridor through White Bay. Finally, section 13, opposing in principle 13,000 units. I wouldn't be opposing anything that the City of Sydney is suggesting at the moment. It's just discussion. Let's not get into an argy-bargy with them that can be misinterpreted, that we're not with them. We are. Thank you.
Further contributions from the gallery? Yes, please come forward, sir.
Is that Davey McDonald?
Yeah, I'm Davey McDonald. I'm here coming from North Sydney, but I do have a business interest in Parramatta Road. So I've come here to share some ideas and very briefly with you, and I think it's really important that you understand one of the first things I heard from the councillors here earlier on was the cost of this project. Okay, you've got to add to the cost of that project what it's costing across the northern...
Who is this person speaking to us?
This is Davey McDonald.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Okay. Do I get an extension of time for that? Well, anyway, we'll see what happens.
I'm sure you will, everyone else.
Okay, thank you, Comrade Byrne. So the issue is this, that the cost of the Western Harbour Tunnel and Beaches Link is going to cost $14 billion. So what you're looking at as a debt being carried by the state is almost double what you're already considering. Now, one of the most important things that you need to understand that this is all being done for profit. And the profit is that they need to get more vehicles through those tunnels onto the freeways or the motorways, the tollways, to make them pay. But what you look at here is the possibility of another Lane Cove tunnel. And when in this document you've produced, Darcy, is actually to concede that the tunnel, our tunnel in Western Harbour Tunnel will be built, and that your motorway, the stage 3 is going to be built as well. Well, the issue around that, and what's really critical, is both are interdependent on each other. And that is that if the Western Harbour Tunnel doesn't get built, then the raison d'etre for the reason for having WestConnex 3 is stripped away, because there's 40% of the traffic that's analysed and planned to be coming across through that tunnel is not going to be there, so it doesn't become profitable. Now, the only solution is, and it's in this document here, is the protection of rat runs and roads and the etc. Well, you're not going to be able to do that, because with the interchange planned at Rozelle Bay, they're going to have to widen roads to enable more traffic to get on so it becomes profitable. Otherwise, what you are faced with, as we all are, is another Lane Cove tunnel, which the state payers, the ratepayers of New South Wales have had to bail out on 3 occasions. So consider that. It's a business model that is totally flawed. And then when you talk about smokestacks and filtration, what that doesn't take into account is the induced pollution from increased traffic. That's another issue why you should oppose this. And yes, you can oppose it, because when people say you need to have representation at a federal level, which I heard when I first came into here, is to say that the rights of women to have the vote was not won because it was not initiated initially in Parliament. And all actions, all democratic actions have taken place because of the likes of comrades like you out there fighting for it. The action you must do is to stop it, and you can.
Davey,
thank you.
You a leeway.
Thank you.
Well done. I'm not certain that the suffragette movement can be directly equated with the anti-WestConnex movement, but they're both admirable causes. Okay, next contribution from the gallery. There's no further contributions at this time. It's been fun. Thank you for your contributions. We'll now go to councillors. Discussion. Councillor Lockie, then Councillor Hesse.
Can we go back to the question that I asked before the gallery spoke, which I think was with point 14, whether the intention there was to add a resource to the campaign or to replace, for example, the funding that's been proposed by the Greens for the No WestConnex community organiser?
We'll deal with the Greens motion when it comes up on the agenda, and I'm happy to make my argument about that then. Certainly the aim is, sorry, I'll have an adjournment if you prefer, but I'd like to address it. I'd like to answer Councillor Lockie's question. But certainly the intention is to dedicate a new resource within the WestConnex unit without expanding the budget. Now, that may not be achievable, in which case I would expect council officers to report back to a council meeting that it would require additional resources. But given we have now spent $2.2 million on WestConnex, I think it's a legitimate objective to try to limit expenditure where possible. Further discussion? Councillor Hesse.
Look, I can only echo pretty much all the statements that have been made from the residents from whom we are elected and are here to represent. With no disrespect, it's a matter of opinion that our Liberal colleagues have supported WestConnex. That is entirely their business, and I can't recall what Councillor Vic Macri's position was. But the rest of us all ran on positions which everyone claimed was opposition to WestConnex. This document tonight will be celebrated, if it's passed, by Gladys Berejiklian more than anyone else, because it is a surrender document. That's all it is. It's saying, yes, fair enough, we do indeed need to mitigate. And that's fair enough. I don't think anyone here will argue with mitigation that we should look after things.
Almost everyone has, I think.
That's all fair enough. It's actually quite rude to speak with your mouth full, by the way, Mayor. But what I'd say is that surrender is not what we stood for at this election. We actually stood for a campaign against a proposal which is, yes, somewhat built, but in many cases not at all, which will cause long-term traffic chaos, not just to the inner areas of Sydney, but to Sydney as a whole. This money, all these billions of dollars, should have been spent on public transport. Western Sydney Regional Organisation itself has, just in the last couple of months, called on all this money to be spent on heavy rail links for Greater Western Sydney. It's the kind of thing which creates an equitable city. This is about building in inequality as well as traffic chaos, air pollution and destruction of the community of the area in which we live. If we were really serious, and if the Mayor was really serious, instead of trying to kill this as an issue which might cause him trouble in his future election campaign, he may actually have gone along with what we proposed tonight, which is a serious campaign working with genuine allies in the City of Sydney and building relationships elsewhere, not for the sake of politics, but for the sake of a good outcome and good planning in our city. I'll let others speak now. Thank you.
Further contributions?
A couple of clarifications.
Please proceed.
Through the chair, I'd like to ask what is the current composition of the WestConnex unit, which staff members and how many are currently in that WestConnex unit? And as a supplementary question, there is a proposal here in the Mayoral Minute for advocacy to be conducted through the Council's WestConnex unit. What capacity and what skill sets are there currently for that to occur? And also, there is a proposal in addition for a dedicated officer to work with the groups as a community organiser, I assume, in all but name. And what capacity, again, is there within the WestConnex unit for that position to be filled?
I'll put that question to the Deputy General Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Currently, the WestConnex unit has a manager, that's Kendall Bamfield. It has a dedicated transport engineer, and it has a full-time administrative resource. In addition, it draws on the resources of the strategic planning unit and part-time resources as with Ken Welsh here, who provides support, and other transport planners and the entire resources of the strategic planning unit. In relation to advocacy, I raise that because in relation to advocacy, that's actually where that role, whilst the advocacy would be managed through the WestConnex unit, it would actually draw on the resources of the strategic planning section within council, who essentially that is their core business, is advocating in relation to a whole range of issues, planning issues and planning proposals, and dealing with state government departments.
Okay, thank you for that. Further contributions or questions, clarifications?
Could I just get a clarification of what the Acting General Manager understands as advocacy?
That's a pretty broad question.
No, because I just want a clarification on that, because it seems to be in conflicting with what's stated in 7. I mean, it's talking, 7's talking about outsourcing to advertising agencies. Advertising agencies don't liaise with different government units. So I just wanted a clarification as to what the Acting General Manager is actually talking about when he's talking about advocacy, because I think it's something different.
I'm going to put the question to the Deputy General Manager in regards to his definition of advocacy, and I'm going to give him a fair bit of leeway if that's a difficult one for him to define right at this moment.
Yes, no, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In relation to my previous comments, when I'm referring to advocacy, I'm talking about advocating to state government departments in relation to council's position on any particular matter.
Okay, thank you for that.
So just as a clarification, that would be quite different from a communication campaign.
You'll need to direct the question through the chair.
Through the chair to the Acting General Manager.
Okay. I'll put that question to the Deputy General Manager. For those of you who are unaware with this practice, this is sort of standard operating procedure that Councillor Porteous is carrying over from Leichhardt Council. I'd like us to establish a new practice here where staff aren't badgered if they have a different position to what Councillor Porteous is satisfied with.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. My point of order is that you're running a commentary. That is also not good practice.
Okay,
it'd be good if you desisted.
But can I make another point of order? I'd really like to get on and debate the actual substantive issues rather than, and I won't say fart again because I know it'll only offend people, rather than have this sort of playing around.
Yeah, fair point. Okay, well, I'll endeavour to chair the meeting as efficiently as I can. I don't want to cut Councillor Porteous off. I'm sure she has more questions, but I'll put that last one to the to the Deputy General Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, advocacy is a different role than conducting a communications campaign.
Okay, thank you for that. Further contributions, clarifications, questions through the chair? Does anyone like to debate the issue? Yes, Councillor Steer.
Debate the issue. Well, now that I've had a chance to go through all of this, I think I can say that these are all quite sensible measures, Mayor. But that is not to say that there are some omissions that I think should really be included. And the two that I want to concentrate on are health and economic modelling of WestConnex itself. Those are actually two very good points to attack WestConnex on, because the damage to health through air pollution, tunnelling, vibrations, and that sort of thing will be ongoing for an indefinite period as long as WestConnex stands if it is fully constructed. The relevant officer has already indicated that he's seeking advice on health, and I thank him for his candid and open answers to our questions. They were very heartening to hear that that has already been thought of, but it definitely needs to be included as a way of attacking the very heart and the root of WestConnex, particularly with the government's plan to put more and more people into this area, where there will be more and more people suffering from health problems. The other issue is the economic modelling. When we had the briefing here from SMC, they could not answer my question as to how they would induce people to travel through the tunnel, given the difficulties that the government has had with other tunnels, the Lane Cove Tunnel and the Cross City Tunnel, in making them profitable for private enterprise to buy. They could not answer that question even though I pressed them on it. This indicates to me, this and the fact that they're going on a roadshow to try and drum up some business and some interest in WestConnex, indicates to me that there is a very weak economic model, in fact, if there was one at all, rather than just a mad idea, at the heart of WestConnex. And this means that it will not achieve for the government or for private investors the things that it will the things that the government has stated. And what that actually means is no one will want to buy it, or if they do, they will want to charge $20 each way tolls to recoup their investment. This is not good for our area. So attacking the economic modelling of WestConnex itself is a very good way to show what a poor enterprise it is, and also to frighten off, or also to show investors that it is a poor investment that is not worth their time. So I would ask that those two items be included.
I'll just, in relation to those, thank you for that contribution. It is, well, I'll ask the officers to clarify this, but former Leichhardt councillors will recall that we undertook an analysis of the business case at the time that the highly redacted version was released. And we did that analysis, showed that there were lots of holes in it. My understanding is there's no additional data or information available now that would allow us to further analyse that business case. But I'll ask the manager of the WestConnex unit to clarify that.
Yeah, so I would agree with that. And we are drawing heavily on that that study, and also some work was also done by SGS for the City of Sydney. And some more recent work, which we're also drawing on as well, on the economic side.
Point of order, there's a slightly different context now in terms of the context of the idea of flogging it off that I think could come into play in terms of some of that analysis.
Well, I'm going to suggest that the council officers, along with the email that they're sending with the other information that Councillor De Cruz has requested, forward the very detailed analysis of the business case which was undertaken by Leichhardt Council tomorrow morning to all councillors, and I'm happy to consider any subsequent motion that Councillor Steer would like to move in relation to that. In relation to the health impacts, I'd also like to seek clarification from the manager of the WestConnex unit about whether the consultants undertaking the assessment of the EIS have been directed to include health impacts in their study.
Yes, they have undertaken a high-level health assessment, but as I mentioned earlier, I was speaking to our consultants today and to commission a separate health expert, and I can give details of that person, although I'll need to clarify the availability of that person tomorrow. I have that person's details, so
Given it seems that that's underway, if that's not able to be confirmed for Councillor Steer tomorrow, I'm also happy to consider any further motion that she might move at a subsequent meeting in relation to that. Further discussion. Councillor York, then Councillor McKenna.
Oh, well, I'd just like to concur with Councillor Steer's analysis of these as sensible measures, because I do think they come a long way to defining council's active and constructive role as a source of credible and independent and accessible information to our community about the design of WestConnex, its construction impacts, its potential impacts in operation. I think now that we've managed to get through the tomfoolery of the procedural ridiculousness that opened this meeting, we can see that there are, in fact, a bunch of actions included in this motion that get to that very important role. And I have to say, I take offence, Councillor Hesse, to your direct implication that my opposition to WestConnex is unrelated from action against it, because I believe very strongly that this motion contains strong actions that are imperative to council's role. Now, that doesn't preclude...
I'll call the meeting to order. Please proceed.
I think the various actions, which are pretty comprehensive, I think we'd agree, having sat through the reading of 4 pages of it, all share that common characteristic of trying to support the community in accessing the reliable information the community needs, credible data that the community needs, and responsive remedy through all of the actions that are outlined here. So it's the engagement of the consultants, which have been described here in detail, but also through the staff. It's the sharing of that information through community briefings, site-specific briefings, and the sharing of that factual data so that our community can both have that data to continue to oppose and also to assess the impacts. And it's the bolstering of council's role in logging all of the complaints that our community is experiencing and the impacts that our community is experiencing excruciatingly through the construction, so that we can bolster council's role in advocating on behalf of our community to the government that is not listening. So I completely reject this notion or this false dichotomy that you continue to draw to say you can oppose but then only not take action or only ameliorate. That is not the case in these motions at all, and I completely reject it. On the question of the dedicated resource that is contained in here, again, I strongly believe that given the increasing complexity of this project and the fact that it just grows and grows, further tentacles and like a behemoth, that we need a dedicated resource that looks in the inner west to our area, specifically to the impacts of the stage 3, the M4, M5 link, and not diluted
Move an extension
by...
of time of 2 minutes, seconded by Councillor Drury. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Please proceed.
So that's what this motion proposes, that we have that dedicated resource looking at inner west with an inner west lens and a dedicated focus of our area, because we have been missing that. Now, our council has been missing an elected voice. Now that we have it back, we need to use it and we need to direct it on this area. So that's what this motion proposes. And I can only speak to say I believe that this includes credible actions that will help our community to continue to oppose, but also to understand the impacts in all of the ways that have been raised tonight.
Okay, thank you for that. Further contributions? I think we had Councillor McKenna, then Councillor Lockie, then Councillor De Cruz.
I support the previous speaker's comments and I support this motion or this minute. Just a couple of things that I'd like to comment on, particularly that have been raised by the for the speakers from the gallery. The lack of detail in the EIS is now standard practice for this government. It is the way they do their job. It is the EIS comes without the plans. This is exactly what happened with stage 1. And it's the same again is being repeated for stage 3. And while the focus tonight is on the EIS, which is required by the 16th of October, it is not just about the EIS. This minute is about the whole project. You will note that there is comments there about Haberfield and Ashfield, which has been in the thick of it for the last 2.5 years. So we've been there before. This council now has the knowledge of what's gone before us. And no doubt this is a mad idea. We all know that. And it's being made up as they go along. Keeps changing its route, it keeps changing, growing more tentacles, and of course now we're going to be dealing with it probably in some sort of sold to a multinational, I suppose. I don't know who will ever end up owning it, if anybody would dare to buy it. But we have to be really careful that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and not look after our community and put in place strategies to mitigate the awful impacts. And while we've learnt a lot from stage 1, we have a lot of work to do to try and make sure that the people and the community and the residents are looked after to the best of our ability. So I would really, while we would love to see this not proceed any further, we have to be conscious that it probably will. And
I'll call the meeting to order. Call the meeting to order. Please proceed.
The state government is quite intent that it will proceed. If it does, we need to make sure we're doing what we can.
Okay, I'll adjourn the meeting if you prefer.
I won't speak any further. I don't speak when I'm being, unless I have silence, so I'll finish. Thank you.
If shouting over the top of a woman who was an elected representative who lost her home to WestConnex and who has fought the project for 5 years is a good idea, if you think that's a good idea, you have no idea about democratic conduct. I will adjourn the meeting if there's a further interjection. Okay, further contributions. Councillor Lockie.
I've got a couple of questions which I think may need to go through the chair to the Deputy General Manager in relation to motion 1.
Councillor Byrne, look, tonight, people are constantly sitting and speaking. We need to stand when we speak, surely.
I'll seek advice from the Manager of Administration about whether that's a requirement under the Code of Meeting Practice. I don't believe it is.
In Mayoral, we say.
Right. Well, I'm seeking advice about that.
I don't believe it was a requirement under the Leichhardt Code of Meeting Practice.
Okay, please proceed. Councillor Lockie, please proceed. I have no strong feeling about it one way or the other.
I'm happy to stand if...
Please proceed.
In Mayoral, we say.
Please.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. Councillor Lockie, you have the floor. Councillors.
In relation to 1A, I'm wondering why the stack on Victoria Road in Rozelle near Terry Street has been singled out for particular attention, given that there are similar issues with stacks in Haberfield and St Peters, and particularly with St Peters, the stack being at a lower height than some of the ones in proposed areas. And it's a similar question for 1C. I'm wondering why there are streets such as Mary Street, May Street and Edgware Road in the St Peters and more area that have been missed out of the particular concern.
That's a fair question. I might point out that I've drawn this language and information directly from the council officers and tabled it as part of the mayoral minute, but I'll direct that, and I think it's important that we emphasise all of the impacts in every location across the municipality have equal importance to this council, but I'll put that question to the Director of the WestConnex unit.
Yeah, look, it's mainly in the interests of producing a summary. Definitely agree all the stacks raise serious concerns. And I note that the St Peter's stack is lower because of the airport obstacle limitation surface. And we also note that St Peter's Primary School is near the St Peter's stack. So definitely take your point on that and agree. We single out Terry Street mainly because of the topography, and there is the possibility because of the way the land slopes up on the east side that people could be living above the level of that facility. So that's why we singled that one out. But certainly they're all a concern, and there's no question about that. As for the identifying certain streets, again, that's in the interests of brevity. We're working through the traffic modelling project to identify, to come up with all the streets. And we've, at this stage, we've identified broad areas that include quite a few streets. So again, we could keep going, with the number of streets.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Hesse, is it you? Sorry, I've lost track. No, I've got my notes here. I had Councillor Lockie, then Councillor De Cruz.
Thank you. I guess I'm a little confused now about what's going on here, because as I understand it, RMS has put forward a proposal and submitted that, and the Inner West Council as a government agency has to respond to it. And to that end, the council should be carrying out assessments, as they do, of all development applications that are put into council to see what the impacts are of these projects. And I'm not sure whether your mayoral minute is circumventing the DA process or the response. And furthermore, we actually have a very tight timeline on that response, on the requirement for that response, given that previous experience has been that there's been no extension forthcoming. And so I just don't understand in what context this mayoral minute is being put forward and how it has singled out particular items to cover, because there are several volumes of the EIS, and those of us who have scanned through it have identified shortcomings. I go back to, again, the Leichhardt ward. There are proposed 4 construction sites. There are major realignment of the crescent, reconstruction of a bridge. None of those things seem to be identified in this report, and so I don't understand what context this report is in. And as to the whole project itself, I think it was summed up by a resident in Annandale who said it's like looking at a proposal that's to bring blue flared jeans in again. I mean, it's really something that's out of fashion. We shouldn't even be looking at a road project in the 21st century.
Thank you for that. Further contributions? Councillor Drury, then Councillor Stamos.
I understand that some people take umbrage at me saying WestConnex is being built. I get why. But I have been opposing WestConnex since 2012. We have gone through a process and we have spent almost $250,000 of Ashfield Council's money opposing the madness of WestConnex Stage 1. I and Councillor McKenna are veterans of this, and I welcome those people who have come later with increased enthusiasm to the cause. We have been through a process where we have seen bits of my community destroyed. I have had friends' houses knocked down unceremoniously and not been properly compensated. We have seen what has happened. And just because it hasn't happened in your suburb yet, is no need to come here and get upset when I say WestConnex has been going on for some time. I don't believe we can stop. I don't believe we can stop WestConnex, but that's not going to stop me from opposing it. every step of the way. That's not going to stop me from standing up and saying that what we need to do is put forward an opposition that goes to the details about how this affects people's lives. Because we know from stage one the effects. We know all too clearly. And I think someone mentioned just go down and hang around opposite Bunnings. You can see it. And stage one, the debacle of stage one's not completed. The brainiacs who run this thing want to put a picnic park under the stack in Haberfield so we can all go there and have a picnic with our family. I, for one, don't want to be taking my family to have a picnic there. I see this as being a continuation of a long and tiring process, and I must admit I am tired, I am weary. I am weary of those people who want to hold their breath and say stop it and then get very disappointed when it doesn't. We do not have any capacity to stop it. What we have capacity to do is to look after council assets, to look after our community as best we can, and that is what this resolution should do. I congratulate the Mayor on putting it forward, and I urge all councillors to support it, and shame on you if you don't.
Shame on you! The time has expired.
If you only said that before the election. You would have been I said consistent. I got 4 votes, I'm voting you. 4 votes.
I'm going to declare an adjournment. Given the vitriol that's been expressed from an adjournment of 5 minutes. The meeting will resume in 5 minutes.
Love that democracy.
Yeah, okay, but yeah, no worries. I'll find out. So they're in favour. Yeah, I would. And the person who yeah. So I don't probably yeah. No, and the person who actually said, oh, actually, I saw the I spoke to some calls and I must assume I know that so now we've tried where it would be nice to see but yeah, so but we'll certainly yeah, well, that's pretty I'm not a big fan of working with people. No, either. I don't. But if it's an emergency or if someone's I can't hesitate to get but yes.
Oh, we're all better. It'll be so I'll just arrange for you to so yeah, I'll put it across. So well, I think it's definitely right. So Simon knows the he's actually had character whatever we can
Have a quorum. We'll resume the meeting. I remind everybody again that it's important to conduct the meeting in a respectful way in which interjections are not heard over the top of people while they're speaking. More than willing to continue adjourning the meeting if that's necessary, but my preference is to get on and conduct the business in an efficient and respectful manner. Now, councillors, further discussion. Sorry, I'll just go back to the list. Councillor Stamos was definitely on it, so let's say Councillor Stamos.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think the Inner West Council has achieved an all-time record for getting to the actual substantive motion of the evening. I think we're 3 hours in and we haven't got there yet, so I think they'll be undefeated for about another 100 years.
Let's hope so. But it's not. You will.
Mr Mayor, there are a lot of things in this motion. I suppose in terms of its overall coherence, it seems to be a grab bag of many things. There's a few notes in there, there's a few aspirations in there, there's a few commitments, and then there's a solid part that acknowledges the concerns of our community that really require our support. But again, it's premised on the fact that we're accepting of WestConnex going ahead. That troubles me a lot. And a number of councillors have expressed that. That troubles me a lot. And what it does miss, I think in this defining statement of the Inner West Council, it misses those things that I talked about a little bit earlier on this evening. It misses those high-level strategic things as to why we are opposing WestConnex. And we don't state those things this evening. In a 3-hour debate, we've failed to detail our community that this is the sort of a project that is not a world-leading project. It's not defining for the future of a global city at all. This is a mundane, big road put through the community of the Inner West and 1 or 2 other communities. It's a very, it's a mundane project. It doesn't define, it's not positive, it's not progressive, and it's not future oriented. And its time will be up in a short space of years. Whereas better public transport, ability to expand and modernise that over time, won't come to an end. You'll be able to develop that further and you'll get the best outcomes. Similarly, when you put these big roads through communities, it creates a lot of planning considerations and environmental concerns. These things aren't stated here. Also, I mentioned earlier, is Sydney getting the best bang for the buck? Is New South Wales getting the best bang for the buck? Yeah, that's not the case at all. It certainly isn't the case. And for government expenditure of that nature, you'd want to make sure that we were getting the best value for money, and we will be left with debt for some time in the future. And our two motions tonight haven't focused on those. Other considerations to me that are very important is job creation in areas such as Parramatta, Blacktown, Campbelltown. The people that will expect to do these 1.5 to 2 hour trips each way every single day of their working lives, I think we need to remove ourselves from that ancient ideology, and we need to create jobs for families in those areas near to where they live. If I could have 1 more minute, that'd be wonderful.
It's been moved by Councillor Kiat.
Thank you.
Seconded by Councillor Hesse. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried.
Thank you. So the expenditures we make and the travel considerations that we make for those people are similar to the ones I'd want for me. That is a 10-minute trip to work each morning, a 10-minute or 15-minute work home. That's what they deserve. That's what they need. They have families. They have financial costs, and they don't need these travel burdens that we create for them for $17 billion. And also, I think that we need to state very, very clearly that we want a commitment to pursue fast, comprehensive and fully integrated transport system with the objective of increasing public transport use and reducing the use of private cars. And I think we've missed these high-level strategic things in both of those motions this evening. Thank you.
Councillor Passis. Now, Councillor Lockie, you might not be... Yeah, I don't believe so. She's spoken twice in the debate already. So I'll go to Councillor Passis. Councillor Lockie, you might not be aware of meeting procedure, but generally you're allowed to speak once during a debate. But if you've got a point of clarification...
I was putting questions before, so that's why I hadn't actually given an actual debate. I didn't think.
Okay. Well, if you could, if possible, keep your questions to one section and then subsequently speak on the matter. That would be good practice so that we don't get into the habit of everybody speaking 3 or 4 times in each debate. Councillor Passis?
Well, Mr Mayor, I go along with this mayoral minutes that you've put up because the government has to be accountable, and if it's affecting our residents, it is our obligation to stand up for our residents. Now, I think we're taking on too many issues. You'll be aware that it was the Labor Party's concept, WestConnex. So, and the Liberal Party took it up and they started to run with it. One of the councillors has just stated it'd be good if people could work 10 minutes from where they live. Most of the people in the inner west do. We've got to think of the people out west that are travelling for hours. Now, either we are here... Let's not get above ourselves. We are local representatives. We're not state or federal MPs. We are local representatives, local councillors. We don't even have the protection like state and federal members have. Now, what is it? Are we out here to get the best we can for affected residents? And I would really like to know how many residents are really affected. Or...
Call the meeting to order.
Or are we here advocating for public transport? They're two different things.
I'll call the meeting to order. Please proceed, Councillor Passis.
I was elected to go into bat for residents that had problems that, under our scope, that we could address. Yes, we can also give our opinion on state issues and federal issues. But that's not what we're elected for. We're elected to protect our residents, to look after our municipality. The 3 former council areas, the infrastructure backlog is horrendous. We're talking about public transport. Our pedestrians are falling, our elderly pedestrians are falling and sustaining terrible injuries because we haven't kept up with having safe footpaths. We have grave parking problems here. Now, to say...
Sorry, if you could just assist for a moment, Councillor Passis, if the minute taker could make note of the time available left for Councillor Passis to continue speaking. I can't be much clearer about it. I'm not going to oversee a meeting in which there are continuous interjections while councillors are speaking. I'm happy to adjourn the meeting again, which will be really annoying for all of us, So it's a last warning. Whoever the last person was who had such a clever and witty thing to say that they couldn't resist, don't do it again or there'll be another adjournment. Please proceed. Okay, adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes.
So, they think it's funny.
This is actually undemocratic. This is undemocratic. This is undemocratic. You are just
A little bit of discipline, a little bit of discipline, folks. A little discipline.
undemocratic.
Most social movements have discipline.
Well, why don't we have a debate without the mayor being present? Who's in favour? Aye. Okay, if the mayor's not going to be here, we'll have a discussion.
This is a discipline, is it?
Yeah, well, look, if the mayor doesn't want to chair the meeting, we can have a discussion amongst us. What do you think? Who would like to speak? Let's talk about let's talk about respect. Let's talk about the community actually being respected, because I have not seen respect here tonight at all. I have seen the most terrible exhibition of a lack of respect from this mayor, and I think it's absolutely shameful.
People are yelling out things about people telling me that you're not genuine in what you say. It's just outrageous.
So we've been around so that about all of it.
Excuse me, we have never put up with this. I've never seen anything like this. It is appalling.
Very, very long time. I've been involved in progressive movements for a very long time, and none of those have been Downstairs, yeah, it's very easy. Okay. It's good to know.
So those are the comments. And obviously, as far as I know, I've never been in a oh, I know those. I'm absolutely. I'm just saying, I think asserting that people are meant to be. No, you have, but other people. You have. Easy. As far as I know, I've never seen anything.
Okay, one more time, we'll resume the council meeting. Councillor Passos has the floor. I'm going to ask the minute taker to set the clock at 1 minute, which is approximately the amount of time that she had available. Please proceed, Councillor Passos.
I forget where I was. Oh, as I said, we were elected on many other issues apart from WestConnex. It's all right for the Greens to play these games because they'll never be in government, either state or federal. If they were really sincere about individual issues, they can be addressed and we would all get on board and back them. If there was a resident that was having a terrible impact, got paid less than what their property was worth, or been adversely kept up all night, I'm pretty sure all the councillors would come on board and go into bat for that resident. But when you're bringing up all these different issues and talking about public transport and talking about bicycle tracks and everything else, it's got nothing to do with the most serious one, and that is the impact of WestConnex on our council area and our residents. I will be voting for the motion, and I am so happy, Mr Mayor, that you have faith in the staff, which I have up until today. So far I have 100% faith in them, that they are good enough to advocate on behalf of the residents, to take their concerns and let us know about them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Further contributions, Councillor Lockie, and then Councillor Kiat.
Thanks. I'd just like to reiterate the concerns that have been expressed by residents and some of the other councillors here about the focus of this Mayoral Minute being predominantly on amelioration and support, which is not to say that these aren't critical. I absolutely agree that they are critical functions, and I say that as somebody who's worked as a part of a community group that has been performing that role, particularly in the absence of an elected council. But the concern that I've got, and the reason why I think everybody is highlighting the importance of this, is so we can see in the substantive motions that there are a couple of clear ones there that definitely point to what opposition looks like. For example, a communications campaign that highlights opposition to WestConnex, support for the community organiser that is working on the campaign to stop WestConnex. And the reason that's important, I think it was raised earlier that the campaign to stop WestConnex has had no impact. I would disagree with that because, of course, you know, we're dealing with a huge juggernaut. They've got all the money, they've got the power, they've got the legal rights to push ahead. But what opposition has done, not just at a community level, but also from the former elected councils, is that has put critical information into the public sphere. I'm talking about the very expensive reports that were commissioned by City of Sydney, by Leichhardt, by Marrickville, by Ashfield Council, that really highlight the reality of the impacts and really made the differences between that and the government propaganda really stark. I'm talking about the kind of alternative plans that have been developed by the City of Sydney and that I know the Inner West Council has done work on as well. These are really important because it's not coming from anywhere else. Community groups can try and put these things forward, but they are expensive and they require specialist expertise that councils can access in a way that individual community members often cannot. And that's why people are so concerned about the lack of this detail, particularly following on from the first motion that we voted on, where we made it clear that this council does oppose WestConnex in the strongest possible terms. Perhaps the intention is that this motion will complement the substantive motions that I hope councillors around the table are looking to support in some form as well, because then we will have the beginnings of a very good strategy that combines support and amelioration and opposition all together. I do have a couple of concerns with the motion as it's worded. For example, there's a lot of detail in there on the $450,000 that's been spent to date by council. I think it's very important, very hard for us to judge the value of that, given that those reports are not available for public or even councillor viewing as yet.
Moved by Councillor Stamler, seconded by Councillor Porteous for 2 minutes. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Please proceed.
So I wouldn't like to see that the information that's in that motion be used as a reason not to invest in further expert studies. I've already raised the concerns that I've got with the specific examples of impacts. I'm also quite concerned that one of the steps of this motion seeks to criticise, as Mr English from the community pointed out earlier, that seeks to criticise an aspect of the City of Sydney's alternative plan, which is not to say there aren't valid concerns to do with plonking another 13,000 units in the St Peters area. My concern with putting our opposition to this in this motion is that even the City of Sydney will say that it is just basically unalternative at this point, and these are more suggestions than anything else. We need our allies. If we're going to really be serious about opposing WestConnex, there aren't many that have the kind of power and influence that councils like us can have. So I am concerned that by putting this in the motion, when it is little more than a suggestion, that we are setting ourselves up for a battle we don't need to have. And and I would say as well, just in regards to the City of Sydney, notwithstanding the fact that they are obviously a much more cashed up council than we are, they are a good model of what opposition plus amelioration does look like when it comes from a local council. One of the criticisms that gets levelled at them is that their LGA is not directly impacted by a lot of WestConnex. Ours is. So that's the minimum standard I think we have to meet in our response to this.
Councillor Kiat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I just want to express my sincere gratitude for all the members of the community who have come tonight and members of groups that have been active on this issue for so long, and as has been pointed out, they've done so without any remuneration in their own time, and now we've taken up more of their time, and I want to congratulate those who are still here. We've heard that there's no false dichotomy between opposition and mitigation. But those in the gallery have picked up on the fact that this motion, this Mayoral Minute, in fact, tries to actually drive a wedge between the substantive opposition that we've put up in the motions that were meant to be heard at this meeting and the Mayoral Minute. And some councillors have stated that they oppose WestConnex, but they don't believe that we can actually stop it. If you don't think that we can actually stop WestConnex, then that would explain why you don't want to commit council resources to the community groups that do believe that we can stop WestConnex. We've been told not to get above ourselves as, you know, local councillors and members of the local community, but we also know that all change comes from below, and that's why everyone has come here tonight. It's because we believe that actually as community activists and as community leaders, as councillors, that we can make a difference in stopping WestConnex. So I want to pick up on the suggestions made by those speaking on the Mayoral Minute that motions 2 through 4 on the agenda be added as and replace clause 14 of the second Mayoral Minute. I want to ask the Mayor to consider the suggestion that was made by many residents, and I think they made that suggestion because they want to see true opposition as well as mitigation. We know that campaigns against the East-West Link in Melbourne and against Row 8 in Perth relied on huge community campaigns, and the rejection of those projects followed changes of government. Now, we don't yet have New South Wales Labor on side. We have local Labor on side, but we don't yet have New South Wales Labor on side, and we need to build a huge community campaign because really the way that we're going to win this is by getting political support at a state level, and we'll only do that through a really concerted political campaign. And we need to allocate resources to that. So I really think that it's important that we don't just try and get our WestConnex unit to advocate to state government agencies without any additional resources. What we really need is a public political campaign that is fully resourced and performed with the capacity of an agency that can actually perform that activity. So I'll just finish quickly. I want to reiterate my thanks to everyone who has come here tonight, and I want to really ask that, Mayor Byrne, that you consider adding to your Mayoral Minutes the motions that we were brought here to discuss.
Okay. Councillors? Of course. Councillor Porteous, then Councillor Macri.
Look, I think one of the most important things that we need to focus on is respect. And I think that there really needs to be a greater respect for the communities that have fought WestConnex, not just for a day, not just for a month, but literally now for years. And as has been pointed out by Councillor Kiet, are still here at this late hour because they deeply care about the fact that WestConnex is literally destroying our neighbourhoods as we speak. We can all make choices. We can make choices about one-upmanship, we can point score, or we can actually make choices which make a difference in the lives of people. And I think that it's terribly important that we make some serious decisions tonight about seriously opposing WestConnex. My concern with the Mayoral Minute is that the first stage, part 1, really is the legacy from the administrator. There's really nothing there beyond what was already established by the administrator. It doesn't really, it's a list of what has been identified within the submission to date, but it doesn't take us anywhere. My concern with part 2 is that it seems to want to point the finger at the fact that money has been spent on WestConnex. I would say let's acknowledge the fact that we need to spend money on WestConnex, and let's acknowledge that we actually need to spend more on WestConnex if we want to get a good result. I'm surprised with point 4, Mayor, that it doesn't actually start with a statement that the council opposes WestConnex. and the reasons for the opposition, because I would imagine that if you're writing to the Minister for WestConnex, one of the first things that you would want to put up front in that correspondence is the council's opposition to WestConnex and the reasons for those oppositions. So I'd ask that you would consider adding that to your correspondence with the Minister for WestConnex. In terms of point 7, I think that it's been made clear that the advocacy that the staff understand from this is advocacy in terms of talking to other levels of government. It's not a communications campaign. So there's a contradiction in there which is unclear. I think it's probably better to remove it. And in terms of point 13, I concur with my colleagues that there is really no point in, again, opposing at this stage when that is actually not something which is a current policy or proposal from the City of Sydney. Point 14, well, you know, if this is supposed to be something which is going to stop the community organiser from being funded, then it's a mistake. It's a mistake that the Mayor would not see that as being something that's absolutely critical. And again, a decision of respect for the community that has fought WestConnex and is here tonight. This shouldn't be an us and them kind of situation. We're all us. We're all us. We're all in this together. We're all part of this community. And all of us should be trying to make sure that WestConnex doesn't go ahead. So finally, I would ask that when this is considered this evening, that we take part in part 2, that be considered in seriatim rather than as one motion. Thank you.
Councillor Macklin.
Thanks, Chair. I think I said before that this is a state project and the community is divided. The last poll of the community ran it at almost 50-50 as support for this project and support not for this project. So to say we have to speak as one voice is important. If stage 3 doesn't go ahead, it leaves certain suburbs in this LGA critically compromised, particularly around Ashfield, Haberfield, Marrickville, Sydenham, Tempe, seriously compromised. So that is the concern. And that's why I commend you for your motion as in dealing with the issues associated with the actual project itself. I think your motion is in detail because it is a detailed project, and the very first paragraph of it dictates that we're going to get all the consultants we need to actually get the outcome we need for the residents. The other question I want to ask you, and I find quite strange because it is a state government project, what exactly do our state MPs, what have they done? I mean, this is like us screaming from outside the football stadium. We're not even in the bleachers. We're outside where this game is going on. How much have the state members actually put in from their budgets? What have they done? I mean, I can see our contribution at $2.5 million. And what does that mean? I hear people talking about financial responsibility of the state government to deliver a project that's not going to sell us into the poorhouse. But when I look at our budget, what does it mean? Well, I'll tell you what it means. It means of normal footpath reconstruction, we've missed out on 23,551.44 square metres of normal footpath reconstruction. And the higher level of reconstruction that I brought into Marrickville when I was mayor, which was to get streetscape reconstructions with a water-sensitive urban environment, including tree plantings, well, we've missed out on 15,476.96 square metres of water-sensitive footpath reconstruction. And having just letterboxed my LGA, my area, Marrickville Ward, I know it's in serious need of it. And when I looked at the issues why Marrickville was amalgamated, it was an infrastructure backlog. It wasn't because we weren't viable. I'm just concerned. We've got many pressing issues in our area. We've got the Sydenham to Bankstown corridor. We have to look at that. We've got to see what impact that's going to do to our area. And to be focused on something that we cannot actually get in the game, I want to know what the state members from their budgets have actually put forward. That's a fair question for this council to ask. What have they done? They're in the game. I want to know what they've done. I want to hear. Why shouldn't the committee? Why are our records all open to everyone and no one else's are open?
Move an extension of time of 2 minutes. Seconded by Councillor Passos. All those in favour, against, declare it carried. Please proceed.
Diametrically, completely opposed to running a political campaign to try and waste more of the ratepayers' money in a political outcome to the state government. I'm not interested in that at all. All I'm interested in doing is delivering outcome for the residents, and to spend 1 cent on an advertising agency to run an advertising campaign, a political campaign, and the words have been said, a political campaign is not what we need. What we need is the information you've asked for in this report to actually fight them on the proper grounds, not a dirty, sluggy campaign that will actually just bring this council in disrepute and probably bring it in the eyes of probably even getting this council sacked again by the state government, because that's what I can see happening.
Call the meeting to order.
I think it's important that we worry about how we address the issues. And you know, the issues like a resident, a pensioner came to me, they planted a tree next to their house 30 years ago. This tree is now actually damaging their house. The council's position is get a level 5 arborist to do a report. Then go get an engineer to actually give me a structural report if we can remove that tree. Who's paying for that? The actual resident. The actual resident has to pay for that on his own property. And I think now, if the people want to start this advertising campaign, here you go. I'll put $100. I'll match it. Everyone puts in $100 here, and they've got $1,500 to start your campaign. But I'm not going to spend $1 of ratepayers' money. And I challenge all the other councillors, put your $100 up. If you all put $100 in, my $100 is there for you to take for this campaign. But I'm not spending a cent of council's money that way. And that's what I believe. Thank you.
Well, I know one particular Deputy General Manager who's going to be very happy with Councillor Macri. The man who's the money man. Where is he? Go and get Michael. Tell him the good news.
So this goes to the campaign. I'll put in 100 right now. I'll put in a lot more than 100, Vic. As long as everyone puts it in, it's just 2 of us. No, it's got to be. Everyone's got to put it in.
Point of order. I think this is a pecuniary interest.
I'm going to point out to councillors that it would be improper for any of us to contribute money towards the council for the purpose of a political campaign, but I think the point's been made. Okay, further discussion. Is there anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak who would like to do so amongst the councillors? If not, I'll very briefly make use of my right of reply before putting the motion.
Point of order.
Of course.
I did request that we deal with at least some items in seriatim.
I won't be choosing to do that.
But that can, if you refuse, then we can go to a procedural motion on whether or not they should be dealt with in seriatim. So I'd ask that we have a procedural motion on that.
The Code of Meeting Practice is quite clear that there's no requirement upon me to amend a mayoral minute in any way, and that I'm able to table it and have it dealt with at the council meeting. We've already had detailed advice about this tonight. You lost the motion of dissent.
Well, just to clarify, the Code of Meeting Practice notes that if a councillor requests that points of a motion be voted on separately, for example, at a seriatim, then a procedural motion needs to be put and voted on in favour of such a request. So I'm making that request.
That doesn't refer to mayoral minutes.
And I move that you put the mayoral minute.
I would. It refers to all motions.
Okay. Well, I'll seek clarification from the council officers. I'll ask the Manager of Administration to explain the council policy and the Code of Meeting Practice in relation to the item that Councillor Porteous has raised.
Through the Mayor, procedural motions can be dealt with ad seriatim to the business that's on the table. At the moment, we only have one motion on the table.
Okay, thank you for that.
That doesn't actually answer the question.
Through the Chair, you could move ad seriatim on the mayoral minute, but that's the only business that's on the table at the moment.
That's what I've requested, that we deal with the mayoral minute.
So Councillor Porteous is moving that the items be dealt with seriatim. I will oppose that, but I'll put that to the vote immediately.
The exact motion is that on point 2, so point 2 of the motion, that items 7, 13 and 14 be dealt with in seriatim.
Okay, so that's been moved by Councillor Porteous. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Stamoulis. All those in favour? All those against? That's been defeated. I'll now make my right of reply unless you have another point of order, Councillor Porteous. No? Okay, excellent. Okay, thank you very much for the lively debate. I think it's important, this is the basic principle that will govern my conduct as Mayor in relation to WestConnex, that we oppose the project outright on public policy grounds, and we also fight for every single piece of amelioration that is humanly possible if Gladys Berejiklian is bloody-minded enough to proceed with the project against our demands. In regards to the issues that have been raised about procedure tonight, to be frank, I did think it was quite strange that at the very first meeting of the council, a motion for an extraordinary meeting was tabled. That was a pretty interesting piece of political power play. That's never been done before in my experience.
Can I suggest that you actually speak to the substantive motion that's before you, rather than the?
Would you like another adjournment?
No, just speak to the motion. Just speak to the motion.
Well, I didn't expect to have many friends from the Greens Party membership base, Rochelle. Would you prefer another adjournment? I haven't spoken yet. I'd like to use 3 minutes to explain my position respectfully, which you may or may not agree with. But if you insist on shouting over the top of me at Councillor Porteous's instigation, then we'll have another adjournment. Which would you prefer? Okay. I oppose the project on public policy grounds, and Councillor Porteous and everybody else here will know that Leichhardt Council has been opposing the project since 2013, at my instigation as Mayor at the time. In regards to the procedure here, an extraordinary meeting was called. At that point, I was required to convene that meeting, which I have done. In my view, the motions that were before us, which circumvented any report coming to especially the newly elected councillors about WestConnex, which would have been my preferred process for them to get fully informed about the issue before having to vote on substantive policy motions. In my view, the motions that were put before us were insufficient. And so I thought it was more important that I table motions here tonight, and I wasn't able to put a motion on notice. That's not something that you can do under the Code of Meeting Practice for an extraordinary meeting. So I needed to make use of my mayoral minutes. I thought it was important that we actually be explicit about the fact that we're opposed to WestConnex, which the tabled motions do not state openly. Secondly, I thought if we're going to talk about the various actions that the council should be taking in relation to WestConnex, that we should be very thorough and detailed in what we proposed and adopted. And I don't think people can criticise me for having put forward something that's too detailed. I'll cop that on the chin. But I don't think anyone could argue that it's less thorough than the motion on notice that was proposed by the Greens councillors. It is a very detailed motion, and there's a very detailed list of actions within it. And it's very, very clear to me, having knocked on at least as many doors as anybody in this room during the election campaign, that what the vast majority of residents in Balmain Ward and every other ward in the council want is for the council to do both of those things. Oppose WestConnex in principle and to be very, very professional and thorough in proposing every single piece of amelioration that we possibly can, and then fighting tooth and nail to have those amendments implemented. And that will be the approach that I take to this issue throughout my term as Mayor. The proof will be in the pudding, but my intention is, whether you agree with my political position or my political party, to prove to you that I will be effective in advocating for those objectives. And I'd like to point to one particular segment of the recommendation which has been put forward, which I think is a good idea. We should be seeking to try and establish an independent dilapidation report service through this council, because the poor buggers in Haberfield who've got cracks in their walls and are now having to depend upon the contractor who the state government chose and paid for to determine whether they get any compensation for the damage to their property would be much better off if there was an independent report which this council had provided and then kept on file to give them a leg to stand on when they get to court. So that's one component. I think we need to try and be creative and innovative with putting forward as many of those sorts of actions as possible to get the best possible result that we can for our residents. One final point in relation to the issue about the St Peters interchange and the very high residential development that's been proposed there by the City of Sydney. I agree, having worked very closely with Clover Moore during my previous term as mayor, that we should be seeking to establish strong collaborative relationships with every single elected representative and every single mayor from all of our neighbouring councils and all of the councils within the Sydney metropolitan region. I'll do that with Clover Moore. It won't be through a conduit of any kind. It will be as the leading representative of this council, speaking as an equal for a council which has as large a population base as the City of Sydney. But a relationship of equals can't be one that's based on obsequiousness. And we need to be very clear that under no circumstances will we ever support 13,000 units being slapped down in St Peters. It's a ridiculous and obscene proposal. It's an obscene proposal. And if this motion is adopted, I will be
enough of your shout.
when you shout. I'll be writing to Clover Moore and making very, very clear that she's going to continue to advocate for our community. She will receive opposition from this council every step of the way.
Stop shouting at us.
All those in favour? All those against? Sorry, I'll ask you to raise your hands and indicate your support.
Fucking sin, Darcy.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? We're putting the motion.
Point of order. Just to clarify, are you rejecting the proposal?
I put the motion and you have refused to raise your hand one way or the other. I'll put it one more time and then I'll count you as a no. All those in favour?
Clarify.
All those against? I declare that carried unanimously. Good. What a joke.
You're a joke, Chelsea.
You're a fucking joke.
You're a joke. You found people on social media, you're a joke. Shame on you all. Shame on you, Darcy. The recording.
Your time will come, mate.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a threat and ask the council officers to clear the chamber so that the meeting can be conducted without the threat of violence.
Well, there's your headline. Yeah. Mate, it's all about headlines, so it's really disappointing. Darcy, it's really disappointing, Darcy. You don't need to be doing this. We need to be opposing this project.
Well, would you prefer an adjournment?
No.
No, what we want is to have the issues that brought us here tonight discussed, and you've managed to monopolise the time up until now. It is a joke. We actually care about this stuff.
We're not
We are members of the public. We came to hear the Greens motion. It's nearly 4 hours.
It's really important.
We came to hear the Greens motion.
There's nothing that can be done. We've been working on it for 5 years.
And I wonder how many of you have looked all through the EIS.
Actually, you're sitting in the right spot with your back to us as much as possible.
Turn around and face the public, mate. We came here to hear the Greens motion. We've been here 3 hours. We came here to hear the Greens motion.
I represent the people of Marrickville.
Well, you're standing up. You do not represent me.
Then you shouldn't have gone for amalgamated council.
Absolutely.
How dare you say that after amalgamating this council?
I didn't amalgamate the council, mate. Get
Well,
your facts right.
Here you are, mate.
oppose it.
Inner West Council is what you were running for. So represent the Inner West.
We want to hear the Greens motion that was advertised. We want to hear the Greens motion. This is outrageous. You should be standing up for us, you people there. We are members of the public. We came to hear the Greens motion.
We'll sit down with you.
Laugh, very funny. We came to hear the motion that was advertised, not the Labor Party motion that was put forward without any notice. Shame on you.
Just get on with the actual business you're doing.
Yeah, bring it on.
The rest of it is politics.
We're members of the public, we've got a right to hear the motion that was advertised.
Thank you.
That's our right. You represent us, you don't represent a political party, you represent the community.
We'll resume the meeting.
The motion that was advertised.
We'll resume the meeting.
Hear the motion.
We'll resume the meeting. We'll resume the meeting. I would ask the gentleman who was abusive and then issued the threat previously.
That wasn't a threat.
Well, you said you'll get yours. I interpreted that as you. Yeah.
Those political flags that people will see through.
Well, after you were abusive and swore at me and the other councillors and then issued what could easily be interpreted as a threat, I was quite alarmed. I'd ask you to desist from that.
Yeah, I'm 66 years old.
That's fine. I'd ask you, if you'd like us to continue the meeting.
He was also swearing from a councillor last night.
Yes.
I can't continue the meeting if you're going to interject for the entire time. So I'll just wait. When you desist, we'll be able to continue the meeting.
Yeah, because we're very naughty.
And I am going to adhere to exactly the same rule that I stated at the beginning, that if there's no interjections or disrespectful conduct, that we'll continue with the meeting.
Does that apply to you?
Well, I'm chairing the meeting as effectively and efficiently as I can. Okay, well, you let me know when you've finished, Christina, given you're such an expert on chairing meetings. You let me know when you finish interjecting and I'll continue the meeting.
You've never been to a meeting as poor as this, you should be ashamed of yourself.
You should. Darcy is ashamed.
I'll just
It's
wait.
awful, Darcy. Bring back the administrator. Bring back the administrator.
This is what you've succumbed to. Yeah, my motion to oppose WestConnex really set them off.
Sorry.
You're joking about this. This isn't funny.
I'm waiting for you to desist from interjecting.
Well, could you say something then?
No, you can't. You're not an elected member of the council.
Good job. You wouldn't be where you are.
That's all it is. You're a councillor, mate.
If you've concluded, we'll be able to continue with the business of the meeting.
Hoping to be, but not yet.
I'll just wait. Okay, let's continue with the business of the meeting. The next item on the agenda is the first motion on notice from Councillor Porteous and others. I've forgotten who the seconder is. That's motion 1, which I'll ask the minute taker to provide on the screen. Councillor Porteous, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I actually sent it's amended, yeah, thank you. So there is an amended motion. I've got copies to share with other councillors. And thank you, Mayor, for allowing us now to consider the motions which are on the extraordinary meeting agenda. Look, I think the thing is that, as has been pointed out tonight, the EIS is a completely overwhelming process. It's overwhelming for the community. It's overwhelming for me, and I'm sure for all of the councillors. I mean, the sheer number of pages, the sheer complexity, but at the same stage, the sheer lack of complexity in the sense that the lack of detail where detail is required, and the enormous amount of information that is in it at other parts of the EIS. Really, Mayor, are you listening or are you playing with your phone?
Sorry, Councillor, I'm listening. I'm
okay,
multitasking.
Great. All right, great.
Honestly, I don't think you could complain that you've treated me in a particularly respectful manner tonight.
No,
I'm not interjecting. Please proceed.
Okay, I just really would love your attention.
Well, you've got it.
Thank you. I think it's incredibly difficult for us to be able to deal with the EIS, and we therefore are looking to the council as really the only body that has the capability and the resources to properly address that kind of detail in the EIS and provide the kind of detailed and informed submission that we need in order to put our best case forward for opposing WestConnex. So motion 1 looks specifically about the consultants and the expertise that council is using. And having met with the council staff about this issue, I have, I think, a good understanding about where our strengths are and where we could strengthen our submission further, which is where the motion as amended identifies. So we're looking particularly at, we are doing traffic modelling, but we also need to do traffic modelling which is going to test the assumptions that are in the EIS. We need consultants to be looking at the tunnel engineering, consultants on the health and the mental health and the community wellbeing matters that are arising from the WestConnex project, because they are really critical as well. And we've seen with stage 1 and stage 2 just the kind of impacts that there actually are on the community. We need to properly assess those. We need to look at the safety aspects of this project. We have seen, as Councillor Passos has pointed out, with the terrible state of a lot of the footpaths, for example, and the way that people have been treated very badly with all of the works that have gone on with stage 1 and stage 2. We need a noise expert who's particularly going to assess the cumulative aspects of the noise. Again, something that's not been addressed in the EIS, and the reports from the community are that that's one of the worst aspects of the noise, is not the one source of noise, but the cumulative sources of noise, and often the ongoing noise from one part of the project to another, which means there's no respite at all for community who are impacted on. And of course, the issue about the financial modelling and the cost-benefit ratio, which also needs to be looked at. In addition, we want to be sure that our air pollution consultant is completely covering all of the issues, and that we're looking at the environmental heritage, biodiversity and the planning impacts, and they're fully assessed. Some of those may be able to be assessed by council staff with the relevant expertise.
Motion for an extension of time moved by Councillor Hesse, seconded by Councillor Steer. For how long, sorry?
2 minutes. Thank you.
Time for 2 minutes. I'll put that. All those in favour?
Aye. Thank you.
Against? Declare that carried. Please proceed, Councillor.
So it's this fact that we do need that really specialist expertise, because if not us, who? That's the issue. It's something which only the council has the capacity, has the resources, and it's money that's very, very well spent, because it's money that's actually going to help our residents understand better what the issues are. Even in terms of mitigation, you can't mitigate unless you know exactly what the impacts are going to be, and we can't understand that unless we do that detailed research. Now, there's money that's still available. There's 165 that's been spent, so I'd ask first of all that we actually spend that remaining money as soon as possible, and that we also, if there's further funding that's required to get those consultants, that we get those consultants on board. Obviously deferring to the expertise of our staff in terms of what other consultants we can access and are needed, but with a guideline in this motion as to who we should be seeking out. Now, in terms of the fact that the submission is due on the 16th of October, when I rang the Department of Planning today to ask what had happened with our request for an extension, and we've gone through that, it's obviously been received today, but they did say to me that we can put in a late submission, and that it will still be assessed by the Department of Planning. It may not be accepted by the proponent, but that doesn't mean it won't be assessed by the Department of Planning. So I think even if we engage some additional consultants, and even if they take a little longer to come back with their reports, it's still worth us doing and putting in a late submission and doing the best job we possibly can to do the best result we possibly can for our community, because quite frankly, you know, if not now, when? You know, and we really need to step up on this one. So I'd ask everybody to put aside everything else that's gone on this evening and support this motion.
I've forgotten who the seconder was.
We didn't get who the seconder was. It was moved by 5 people.
I know, but I'll need a seconder for the minutes. Seconded by Councillor LaCruz. Do you want to speak to the motion, please?
Actually, I will sit. I'd like to reiterate the points I made before, and that's why we brought this motion forward, that it is actually a role of the council to do a full assessment of this, in effect, a development application. And my experience of development applications is that there's a huge input from residents in helping council to assess the development applications, and that is why we've gone through and we've identified some of the experiences of residents in Haberfield and elaborated on what is needed in the EIS assessment. And therefore, I think we do need to extend this EIS, and without it knowing what is currently being assessed, that's our other concern that the Greens had, that there just wasn't a thorough review of the EIS.
Thank you for that. Further discussion? No further discussion. Anyone from the gallery want to address the motion? Please come forward.
Good evening, it's Catherine Gall from Leichhardt here. I wish to speak in favour of the motion and call upon all councillors to support it. I thank councillors De Cruz, Hess, Kiat, Porteous and Steer for their leadership in having the leadership they've shown in calling this meeting and proposing this motion. Residents in Leichhardt continue to oppose the dive site at 7 Darley Road. It is recognised as a highly unsuitable location in terms of traffic and safety impacts. Our community and local school children will be put at risk so that Sydney Motorway Corporation can achieve a time saving. Residents in Leichhardt and elsewhere are concerned about construction phase impacts such as truck routes, air quality, worker parking, out of hours work, exposure to contaminants, cumulative impacts, construction vehicles on local roads, traffic management and contractor conduct. In particular, Leichhardt against WestConnex wants council to engage an acoustic consultant to advise on which properties will be highly noise affected by construction works, including by spoil truck movements. In the case of the proposed 7 Darley Road dive site, we believe that many more properties will be highly noise affected than have been identified by RMS. We must make sure that the noise impacts are correctly assessed and residents are given information specific to their situation. We are also concerned about our local streets being turned into rat runs as people avoid tolls. Don't be taken in by the government spin that this road will fix congestion. The main aim of this toll road is revenue raising, not congestion management. If the government was serious about congestion management, it would prioritise a better public transport network, which would ease congestion for those for whom the bus, tram or train is not an option. The council needs to assess the true impact of the tunnel portals in St Peters, Haberfield, Lilyfield and Rozelle on local traffic conditions and should not, I repeat not, rely on the modelling undertaken by AECOM. The motion highlights to me how disadvantaged the residents have been by the timing of the release of the EIS and the 60-day exhibition period. Council, as I said before, should ask Anthony Roberts, the Minister for Planning, to extend the period of exhibition to give the new council time to respond to the EIS. Given that the plans set out in the EIS are indicative only, Council should also ask the Minister for Planning to commit to a fresh EIS process in 2018 once the contractor to build all or part of Stage 3 has been appointed and once details of how the project will be delivered are known. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Further contributions from the gallery? Okay. Yes.
Janet Dandyward, WestConnex Action Group. I'd just like to say I support the motion for the reasons really that the community does actually know a lot about this kind of process, and it's important that council kind of get some of that information from us as the community. We've actually been through this twice before, and we've done a really good job of it before. That's representative from the WestConnex Action Group, some of which are no longer with us, and we're actually working on that now. So we're doing that work, and we would like your support to do that work, particularly around the EIS. It's very detrimental to the communities. We're suffering noise impacts, we're suffering pollution, and that's without saying what actually is going to happen when the thing is being constructed. So I'd just like to support the motion. Thank you.
Yes, come forward.
My name is Leslie Trelevin and I live near the dive site that's been proposed for Camperdown, Annandale. I'd like to support the motion, and I'd like to support it simply because this EIS is not an EIS. And the best way that we can make that point is with professionals who know that it is not an EIS and who state that it is not an EIS and outline their professional reasons for saying so. That is not something we can do from the community. Darcy, are you listening?
I'm making notes. Sorry.
Excellent. I'm really thrilled about that. Thank you.
It is actually a requirement for me to make notes so I can
Great.
come up with what happens next in the meeting.
Good,
So
thank you.
An apology for that. Please proceed.
Thank you. So my point then is that the money is well spent to give a professional status to the critique of the EIS being in fact a Clayton's EIS, just as the concept design was not a design, it was a series of ideas patched together. So we mustn't let this go through a second time, and we must state that with the council's support so that that comes across authoritatively. Thank you.
Yes, further contributions from the gallery. I have the woman in the front row and then Mr. English.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also wish to speak in support of the motion. I think it's absolutely critical that councillors understand and that the community understands the true impact, which we cannot do until we've had experts review it and expose the lack of detail. What is missing in the EIS? You cannot ameliorate something that you don't understand. And until there's a clarity around the government's plans, particularly in relation to the Rozelle interchange, which has never been done before in engineering terms, and they still haven't found somebody to do it, I think it would be remiss of this council to simply accept that the EIS will be passed without due diligence. And I think it's incumbent on councillors in representing their the people who voted for them to ensure that they do understand what the exact impacts are, and I don't believe that can be done on the basis of this EIS.
Thank you. Nathan English, resident of Balmain and co-convener of Eco Transit. This has been a pretty heated meeting tonight. I'm sure that everybody agrees, and it's only because we have passion that runs very high for this issue. We do not accept that this is the end game. It's just a case of mitigating circumstances. There has never been a motorway project as big as this in the world. And no, that's right, in the world, and certainly not today. Now, this project is anywhere up to $45 billion when you put all of the additional arms and branches that make it viable. $45,000 million. From a state perspective, this local council should feel a sense of responsibility to educate about how this bypass of our council area, and that's what it is, it's about bypassing everything that we value here and asking us to cop the pollution for it, is not the solution for a future Sydney. And we do need to be imaginative and innovative, but we need to be that way in relation to alternatives. This project is ill-conceived and is being fast-tracked, not for the benefit of the community. Most of the toll revenue will be kept in private coffers, and I certainly don't feel comfortable with my children having to pay those tolls into the future, let alone breed the pollution and everything else that goes with it. And from a local perspective, that's what I hope everybody in this electorate has done in representing, like in voting for you people as our representatives, that we did not come here expecting to hear what we heard from certain members tonight, and that's why you've got the response you have. The shortfall in funding for the position for I think it's $50,000 for a coordinator for the campaigns. Mr. Mayor, you have said that you appreciate the work that we've all done as campaigners to date. It's a case of putting your money where your mouth is. It is a small sum by comparison of how much else has been spent, and it helps us do our work, which is completely voluntary. And we do it because we believe in this neighbourhood as much as you do. We live in this neighbourhood as much as you have, and we want to continue to be here and raise our children and have them safe. And that is why we are asking you, please, to sign off on that and keep it going. Because whilst you might not feel that you can be as political, we certainly can be, and we will be in opposition to this project. The council can do its work. We trust the professionals that are doing their work at the moment. I speak in favour of the motion.
Please come forward, Christina.
Hello, Christina Valentine, Leichhardt resident and co-convener of Leichhardt Against WestConnex. I really want to just make one point in relation to this motion, which I support. And I'm very concerned by comments by some councillors today that it's not the place of the local government to comment on or seek to influence this project. The local government represents residents. We are key stakeholders in this project. It is absolutely imperative that the council put all of its resources to good use and properly analyse this project and do the best it can for the residents in terms of measuring the impacts. Now, the purpose of an EIS is, of course, to determine whether or not the impacts of the project can be managed to an acceptable level. How on earth can we possibly make that assessment based on the document they presented the community? We simply can't. Even if we were noise and pollution and environmental experts, which most of us aren't, in the time frame we've been given and in the volumes that we have to wade through, it is an impossible task. All of you here today are here because the community has asked you to represent them. And what we're asking you to do today is to make sure that all of that detail, all of that information is brought to the attention of the appropriate authorities, that the consultation, all of the inquiries that are necessary to form an opinion about the impacts of the project actually take place. And just as an example of the sorts of things that are hidden in this document, when we went through the Leichhardt proposal, we discovered that they plan to put a permanent substation water treatment plant there that will take all of the treated water that washes the tunnel and drop it off into our local waters. Now, I know Mr Mayor is very concerned about the state of the local catchment. Indeed, one of his top 10 points, I believe, is actually remediating the waterways. Well, what we're going to have, if this project is approved, is permanent, forever, dirty water from the tunnels going out through the Blackwater, Blackmore Oval stormwater drain. Now, there's only about 3 lines in the 7,500 words of that document that deal with this, and there is absolutely nothing in there about the ongoing impacts of a substation and water treatment plant in our community. That's just one thing that we picked up on. There are hundreds of items in that EIS that we need to be looking closely at. I'm concerned about footpaths as well, but you know what? I also don't want all our footpaths demolished, and I don't want to have trucks coming into close to our community without proper analysis of the impacts of that. So I'm asking you here today. This is a very sensible motion. It really is the least that the council should be doing, is making sure that it has proper experts to look at the report. Please do the right thing and support it.
Okay. Now, I know there's been criticism of me for not chairing the meeting efficiently enough, and it is now 20 to 10. So is there anyone else from the gallery who would like to address the meeting and maybe hasn't raised, would like to raise issues that haven't been raised as yet in relation to this motion?
Are we, which motion, number 1 or?
Yes. You've spoken to that already, haven't you? Okay, if there's no further comments from the gallery, we've heard from the mover and the seconder. Is there any further discussion? Councillor.
If I can just make the point that I appreciate that with the second mayoral minute that has been presented tonight, that may appear that there is some overlap between some of the content of that and this particular motion. My concern with if this motion was to be dismissed on that basis is that not having seen the existing drafts that that have been referred to that the council is now working on in terms of our EIS submission, it's difficult to judge which of the areas that have been highlighted in this motion that we may be particularly lacking in insight and analysis on at this point, and which would vastly benefit from getting further expert advice where required. One of the first responses to an EIS for WestConnex that I reviewed as part of the community campaign was actually the excellent one compiled by the former elected Ashfield Council, because you had gone to the trouble of seeking consultants across a number of areas, including health, heritage, pollution, and other aspects that have been identified in this motion. I know as a part of WestConnex Action Group, we often had volunteer specialists in particular areas who would make contributions that we used in our own submission. And they were incredibly invaluable when it came to, for example, analysing transport impacts, the noise impacts, and the Alexandria landfill, which is now the site of the planned St Peters interchange. That latter analysis became absolutely critical later on, not just for understanding the impacts of that, but also when the leachate issues began at the St Peters interchange site. We were able to point to that as being not just a consequence of excavating for a motorway in a landfill, but excavating for a motorway in that particular landfill site, because we had the detailed technical analysis that said this was the entirely predictable consequence. And so when residents started coming to us months ago saying that they were reporting horrendous smells coming from the site and health impacts, and were initially dismissed time and time again by the Sydney Motorway Corporation and representatives of the government, we were able to support them to take those complaints to officials, to take those complaints to the media and keep on highlighting it based on the information we had from that submission. So that's why I will be planning to vote for this motion, and I do hope that other councillors will be joining me in doing so.
There's no further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried.
Thank you.
Okay, motion 2. Again, who's the mover of this? Councillor Steer is the mover. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor De Cruz. Yep. Councillor Steer, over to you. Thank you.
This second motion may seem redundant given item 7 of the mayoral minute that we just agreed to, but if we notice, item 7 only talks about a preference. It's not a direction, it's just a preference. And so this motion actually directs that preference in a more meaningful way. What it is designed to do is to set up a council task force, not just the WestConnex unit. We know that the staff in the WestConnex unit are doing their very best, but there's only 3 of them. We need a bigger unit comprising members of the public, relevant council staff,
and representatives from all the local groups campaigning against WestConnex. A lot of what we've heard tonight from the members of the gallery has been simply frustration that after all these years of campaigning, their voices are still not being heard, and fear that if their voices are not heard and they are not represented, then we will be steamrolled by WestConnex. This problem and in fact, I noticed in my briefing papers that Council's own survey shows that the number one concern of residents is being able to communicate with their council. This council task force will enable residents to communicate directly with council and in a meaningful way, and liaise with staff as well. It's also important because of the money that we wish allocated to an external communications group. Again, we know that there's a group manager of communications, there's staff in council who do communications, but their hands are full doing all the normal communications work for 3 councils that have amalgamated and 185,000 people. They don't have particular expertise in, and that's no fault of theirs, it's just the way it is, in directing a public opinion campaign, and that is why an external communications firm is something we recommend. It can be supervised by the relevant people within council and managed and led by them, and that's perfectly fine. But the actual work of directing our message to stop WestConnex should really be done by an external firm. The amount of $50,000 that has been allocated in our motion is a very modest cost given the funds paid given by the $2 million that WestConnex will spend on its own advertising campaign. I've alluded to that a few times during tonight because it shows how scared WestConnex are of the total lack of public support that their project has. It's a modest sum and it's a specified sum, so it's not as though we will be spending money hand over fist. So we've already seen the amounts of money that have been paid to experts. That was money well spent because you have to spend money in order to send out your message, and this too will be money well spent. The New South Wales government is so worried about the opposition to WestConnex and also its financial modelling that it's trying to find private investors. I've alluded to that throughout the night as well. But this message needs to get out to the community that 51% of WestConnex will be sold to private investors, tolls will go up, and any say that the members of the public have in this project will be taken away because private companies are not accountable to members of the public. They are only accountable to their stakeholders. That's a stakeholder, the Councillor McKenna. Yes, thank you. So that is why we have put this motion, and the time has expired. 1 minute? Thank you. That would be nice. I don't have much longer.
No, that's fine. So there's been a motion from Councillor Hesse to extension of time of 1 minute. So seconded by Councillor Stavros. All those in favour, against, okay. Please proceed.
Yes, the communications firm will also be able to keep members of the public informed about the work the council is doing in relation to WestConnex, and that is also an important method of communication because, as we have already acknowledged, we have been voted in to represent the people of the Inner West, and WestConnex is overwhelmingly the primary concern of residents of the Inner West. And that is why we need to support this motion. Thank you.
So, Councillor Cruz.
Okay, I think Councillor Steer has covered all the issues, and I second the motion.
Discussion, councillors. Well, hold on. Now, I'm happy for us, it's 10 o'clock. I don't want to cut off any debate. I know everyone's attended the meeting for a long time in order to speak. It's 10 to 10, yes. Is there anyone from the gallery who would like to address the motion and has something pertinent and valid necessary to say? Yes. Right. There'll be some members of the gallery who give more speeches than councillors tonight. Please come forward.
Janet Dandywall, WestConnex Action Group. That's a tiny bit rude, Mayor Darcy, but still, never mind. Okay. No, I think that's a bit unfair too. Anyway, to make it brief, I support the motion, think it should be passed, and I think the councillors here should do the right thing tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Further contribution from the gallery? Yes, please come forward.
Leslie Treleaven, Camperdown Residents Against WestConnex. I support the motion, and on the basis particularly that the City of Sydney has conducted itself in two parts of a campaign: one, communications, and two, developing a profile about WestConnex through a series of related social media. And I think if we in the inner west want to truly represent the people and their concern about the destruction of their neighbourhoods, we could do no better than to spend a portion of what the City of Sydney is spending in doing a really professional job, letting people know and letting WestConnex know and worrying the hell out of Gladys.
No further contributions. I'll come back to the councillors. Councillor Stamos.
Fellow councillors and fellow residents, as we all know, any campaign will be lost without a good communication strategy. Any business will fail without good communications. So basically, we're asking for a small amount of $50,000, the construction of the establishment of a council task force, which is very important to bring all the key thinkers together, those who have developed the strategy to push this campaign so far. But it would be a great next step to make sure they are resourced in some way via council and through funding. And when we know, when we're already hearing that the state government will be launching into a very long 2-year campaign themselves, I think was the cost $19 million or thereabouts over the next 2 years pushing this project. I think $50,000 is a small amount to ask, and the establishment of a good, strong, effective communication strategy would be very wise.
I am certainly for a good and strong communications strategy on WestConnex and Council's position on WestConnex, but I certainly cannot support this motion tonight for the simple reason that I honestly do not believe with any portion of my being that $50,000 will purchase anything from an external advertising firm of any use to us. I'm sorry to say, but I think that funding will be far better off spent on all the range of initiatives that we've discussed in detail tonight. I think the intent is fair, but I think the execution will absolutely fail. And there's just no way that I could support or justify the expenditure of $50,000 on an external consultant, essentially, who will produce some nice PowerPoint slides, and I say this with all due respect to consultants, and really we will get very little for that money. And we've talked about bang for buck. We've also talked, I think some of the speakers tonight have acknowledged that we don't have the same resourcing as City of Sydney. Wouldn't that be nice? But we just don't. And so if we're going to do something like this, it can't be on a dime where I say with all sincerity we'll just get nothing back. It's not a wise expenditure of council's funding, and it's not a wise focus for the resources in this campaign.
Here. Councillor Passis and Councillor Hesse.
I'm totally opposed to the $50,000 being spent on a communications company. We are paying thousands and thousands for a two-page spread in the local paper, and we have 15 councillors, and we have people that residents can contact council about. I think the residents are well served on information from this council. So we've got 5 active Greens and their supporters on Facebook, which I don't use, but things get back to me. I think that's enough information. They're also giving information on their opponent councillors, and most of the time's not true. So I think the residents are well served, and this council has shown that they're opposed to WestConnex. All the call flutes, all the banners, everything you see around the place that helped a few councillors get elected, that was paid for by the council. That was paid for by the ratepayers. And what did they get? A few extra elected representatives. You cannot put these airy-fairy schemes up, and if you knew about communications, $50,000 is nowhere near what you would need. So it's only to look good and maybe to say, we're going to do this if you vote for me, and if I'm elected, I will put this up. I'm totally opposed to it. Fair enough. I'm not a puppet. I have my own mind. Really? My God.
Councillor Hesse. Some of us are not that cynical, Councillor Passis.
No, you're not.
No, I'm not that cynical.
What are you doing in council?
Call the meeting to order. It's late. We're tired.
I've been involved in the campaign against motorways in the centre of cities on the grounds that they don't work for more than 3 decades. I've been a member of the Wallow Creek Preservation since 1987, which is 3 decades ago when I was a station master at Torella. And I oppose them because they simply don't work. The campaign, I think, there really changed a lot of minds by the happenstance of having a couple of very talented people who were involved in publishing. They published a comic book. Now, you may laugh about comic books, but the comic book, Nick Possum, starring Nick Possum, was out there and distributed to residents around the M5, around the Wallow Creek. It is explaining why motorways didn't work. The great thing about comic books, as I'm sure many councillors and many residents will know, is people read them. That kind of cut through, which is actually pretty cheap, is the kind of thing that I'd be looking for. And I think this is the guts of the motion that has been moved by my colleague, Councillor Steer, is it's a committee that involves our community. It's about bringing us all together and working on this with our collective resources, that is the collective skills we have as a community. And I think we can make a difference. I'm really disappointed Councillor York's contribution. I imagine the Labor Party will file in behind. I'd like to be disappointed by that, but I doubt I will. But I think it would be really good if we actually were fair dinkum about this campaign, because the M5 was stopped through the valley of Wallow Creek. It went under it, but I tell you what, it was a 15, 20-year fight that affected that change. And it wasn't because people gave up, and people put a lot of money in, and it made a difference. And I think that's what we're asking here. And frankly, if Councillor York or any other councillor wants to say, let's increase it to 100 or 200, I'd say, yep, go for your life, because I'll vote for it. Because I'm actually fair dinkum about changing this, because if we don't fight, our community will be destroyed by this road, as it's already being destroyed today. Thank you.
Well, I was just going to say I support this motion not just as somebody who's worked on the community campaign, but somebody who works as a communications consultant and an advertising copywriter myself. I do agree to some extent that $50,000 is probably the bare minimum I'd want to spend on a communications campaign like this. Will it get you the full shebang, bells and whistles campaign? No, probably not. But there are agencies you can use that specialise in working with government organisations or non-governmental organisations, as well as media that you can use that is not as high cost as communications campaigns have been in the past, that we can seek to utilise. A lot of my experience was gained in direct marketing, which seeks to achieve a direct and measurable result, much as this kind of communications campaign is proposing to do tonight. It's a specialist skill to get this right. And I think, unless I'm misremembering this, the question was put to council staff earlier about whether the kind of in-house advocacy that was included within the last motion would cover these kinds of communications campaigns. And I think the answer to that was that it would be a different thing, and I would absolutely agree with that. As Ms Trevelyan from the community said earlier, so far it's really only at council level, the City of Sydney, that has been doing this in terms of having a strong campaign that is opposed to WestConnex, but so too are the community groups, and have been doing it for a number of years quite effectively for, I can tell you, a whole lot less than $50,000 for one campaign. But they need our support, of course, and given that this is one of the only motions that we're debating on tonight that actually seeks to put real tangible action behind our stated opposition to this project, I would hope that councillors who are thinking of voting against this would reconsider.
Through the chair, can I just put a question to Councillor York?
No, you can't.
I think that
Into the mover of the motion. Please proceed.
through the chair,
Yes.
the question to Councillor York is just the amount of money that she would support going toward this proposal to make it work.
I have no idea, and I strongly suspect many people around this table would have no idea, which is even more reason why I oppose it.
And even less idea where you're going to get the money from. Exactly. Sorry, please proceed.
Can I just make the point that the motion is to commit an initial amount of $50,000?
Can I move the motion be put?
Motion be put, that's seconded by Councillor Passis. I'll put that. All those in favour? All those against? That's been carried. We'll put the motion. It's moved, Councillor Steer, seconded Councillor De Cruz. The wording's on the screen before you. I'll put that. All those in favour? All those against? That has been defeated. Next item is
Shame on you. Shame on you, Labor.
I will.
Yeah.
And the Liberals.
Yeah.
Is that what was
Your houses get bulldozed.
Feeling the appreciation, guys, thanks.
You think that's a good thing, do you?
Who's the?
Yeah. If people won't stand up,
Have a think about what you're saying. You said you hope people's houses get bulldozed.
If you won't stand up, don't come crying to me when you're in trouble.
We go home and have a long look at it. Seriously, it's a disgraceful thing to say.
Darcy, people are really frustrated with this, so.
Yeah, that doesn't excuse pure rudeness and disrespect.
What about you? Look at yourself. Look at yourself, Darcy.
Now, motion 3. You guys are completely fixated.
At least Labor have been exposed for the fraud they are.
By moving a motion that we oppose WestConnex. Yeah.
No, look, then you're doing nothing. Kept us all here
Motion 3. It's already been stated by
guys,
council
got your
officers
votes, that's all it's going to ever get you.
We've got 2 motions to go. Motion 3, it's already been stated by council officers that this report will be brought. I'm happy to have it moved and I'm happy to second it. But I don't think we need to debate it because I suspect there's unanimous support for it being adopted.
I'll move the motion and note that it has already been committed to.
Are we talking about stage 2?
I need to amend that.
Amendment to stage 3.
Is that stage 2?
So I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Motion 4. Who was the mover of that?
Look, I'll move that. It's on. It's on. It wasn't on before.
Councillor Porteous, do you want to speak to the motion?
Thank you. Councillors, when we still had the administrator here, there was a proposal that was put to the administrator to fund the position of the community organiser for a further year at a cost of $100,000. That was not supported by some of the members of the LRAC, and the administrator then moved an alternative motion. Well, he said, and then she said that it would be funded. They would approach City of Sydney for half funding of $50,000, and then it would be reconsidered by the Inner West Council once the new council was convened. The City of Sydney has since come back and agreed to the 50,000, and when the community organiser, it's an incredibly important position. It doesn't focus on council in terms of the position. It focuses very much on the community groups and supporting the community groups, but enabling them with a lot of skills sharing and enabling in terms of upskilling a lot of the community members. So the other 50,000 is still outstanding to be considered by the Inner West Council. And it's brought to you this evening because we don't have a community organiser at the moment. And I know that the community members, the different groups, are really feeling that lack of that person, because that person helps make sure that all of the groups are communicating with each other and helping each other. And really, because a lot of the community members who are now extraordinarily, a lot of the members are very well skilled in, but we have new people coming on board all of the time, and it's so important to make sure that they are supported when they get involved with the campaign, and that they're able to do the various things that need to be done in order to be effective as community members. And I have to stress as well that community members are from all different political parties, but most of them probably no political party at all. I'd say the vast majority of people involved in the No WestConnex campaign, and there's about, I think it's about 17 different groups that are active. They're of no political allegiance. They're definitely not, the vast majority are definitely not Greens members. And I think it's a very important role in terms of us supporting and helping and respecting people that are doing an extraordinary job in the community. They really are. And they're doing an amazing job themselves in supporting their local neighbourhood, their neighbours, and supporting people that are really suffering and are very distressed about what's going on with WestConnex. And it's the very least that we can do to fund this role. And it's been run very successfully, I would say, as well. And I would ask that the council support this additional funding so that that person can be recruited and be put into place as soon as possible. Thanks.
Well, I think we'll go to the gallery again. No doubt there's something exciting that hasn't been said yet. Please come forward.
Catherine Gamble from Leichhardt. I wish to speak in favour of the motion and call upon all councillors to support it. Again, I thank the Greens councillors for taking the lead in calling this meeting and proposing this motion. Thank you. 12 councillors ran on a platform of opposition to WestConnex. Okay? This is your opportunity to show that you are genuine in your opposition to the project. The community organiser role helps the many groups united in opposition to the project define our common strategic goals, to prioritise our activities and to execute our campaign effectively. The role's been held by two individuals with great skill sets in terms of campaigning. They've come up with great ideas and they've been a great support to us. I work full time. I've got a 7-year-old. I've got a partner who's out of the country a lot of the time. I haven't got a great deal of time to sit down and plan the minutiae of this campaign. I'm not a Greens activist. I'm not a member of any political party. So there's really no need for you to fear the community organiser role. They're there to help us and support us. I didn't know Christina a year ago, or Jennifer, or who were the other two co-conveners of Leichhardt Against WestConnex. And we've come together, we've formed this group, and without the help of the other groups and the community coordinator, we wouldn't have made the progress that we have. Every day, people in my street approach me and thank me for all the work that we're doing to support them, reading through 7,000 pages of the EIS, going through every single document looking for a reference to Darley Road. These are the things that we want to commit our time to, helping our the residents in our area. But we need someone in this community coordinator role to help us bring it all together to mount a tangible campaign of opposition and to get the message out to the people of the Inner West Council area exactly how bad this project is, why it should be opposed and what its impacts are going to be. So please put aside your concerns about this being some kind of political infiltrator role, and please commit to the expenditure so that we can carry on getting the support we need. Thank you.
In the front row then, Christina, then Nathan.
My name's Rhea Liebman. I live in Marrickville. I also want to address this notion that this position of community organiser is a political one. It's not. It's about sharing information between residents, and in particular, all of the amelioration that you've been discussing, all of the getting the EPA involved into the St Peters interchange, all of the notification of the out-of-hours work at Haberfield from day after day after day after day, that has been brought to the attention of the authorities by community groups. That's not a political gesture. That's about looking after our residents, and that is the only reason I am standing here today, because what is happening to our residents is unacceptable. Council has not been effective in preventing any of those breaches, but the community groups have, and they rely on information and support. And it is completely incorrect to put this position in a political context. It's about looking after our own, sharing information, and trying to do the best that we can with the zero resources we have. So I would also ask you to put aside any preconceptions you may have about what the role of the community groups are. Yes, we oppose WestConnex and we do it with vigour. But this is about protecting our community and about protecting what we live, the area in which we live, and about not being bulldozed, not having interchanges built on top of us without proper amelioration, without proper environmental controls, and without proper respect for residents who have had to go through dust, noise, and construction 24/7. Ms. Passes talks about knowing her residents. Well, I don't know where you were, madam, when these people were going through day after night of construction, but I can tell you where I was. I was writing letters to the minister. I was posting on Facebook pictures so that people would know what was happening. This is not about politics. This is about protecting our own. Thank you.
Christina Valentine, Leichhardt resident. So I'd also like to speak in support of this motion and echo the sentiments of my neighbours. This is not a political role. This is a role to take some of the burden off the community. As if we're not suffering enough, those in Haberfield who have years of construction have another 5 years coming their way. They're expected to spend all of their spare time at meetings like this and door knocking and printing out pamphlets and trying to get information to their neighbours. We desperately need support. I'm not sure what level of, involvement any of you really had apart from the members that I know personally, but I can tell you right now it's taken a huge toll on myself and my family. I also work as head of legal of a government company. I work a 70-hour week. I have a 6.5-year-old daughter at home. Many of us are in very similar situations. We're not working part-time or retired. We're actually holding down very demanding jobs and trying to take care of our families. And what this is doing at the moment to our lives is actually quite devastating in terms of the impact. So what we're asking for is a little bit of help in coordinating some of this. Now, some of the examples of the sorts of things that we do, 3 days after the EIS was released, Leichhardt against WestConnex called a community meeting. We had over 50 people turn up, and we did a 2-hour PowerPoint presentation running through the EIS and its impacts for Leichhardt. Why did we have to do that? Why did we have to do that? We door knock. I have door knocked on many, many homes in Leichhardt, and it is amazing how little information has been given to them. They are deprived of information. They are desperate for us to find out what is going on. We also, as Ria pointed out, we also deal a lot with complaints and compliance issues. I can tell you the story about a lady called Jane who works in acoustics from home, and she had a drill placed directly out front her bedroom window. She came to us because the final indignity was when they put the portaloo directly out front her daughter's bedroom. And she went to SMC and said, why does the portaloo have to be directly out front my bedroom? And we sat on the phone until we got it moved. How disgraceful that somebody, a neighbour, has to do something like that. How disgraceful that it's left to us as a community to take care of our own neighbours like that. These are the sorts of things that are taking a toll on us. They take time away from us and away from our families. We're asking for a pittance of an amount to take some of the pressure off the community groups. I've only been involved for the past 12 months. There are others, some of whom are here tonight, who have been involved for years, and they've got 5 more years coming their way. We ask you to please do the right thing and give us some support to take the pressure off the community.
Evening, councillors. Again, thank you for the chance to speak. I think there might have been a little bit of confusion before I was talking and mentioning $50,000. This is actually what I was talking about. The $50,000 for the community coordinator position is critical to the work that we've been doing voluntarily for so long. It's proven its worth time and time again. It takes care of administration of discussion lists online, making sure that licenses and everything else are taken care of for various groups and what have you, just making sure that all the T's and I's, are taken care of. It is incredibly important to help take a bit of load off what we already do. We give ourselves selflessly to this with conviction that goes well beyond politics, that it's the right thing to be doing. Most of us are doing it because we, with all due respect, have lost a bit of faith that politics will deliver. So we do it because it's a community grassroots-led initiative, and we continue to do it as such. And we would love for all of you to step up and help us with voices as loud as possible to help us do our work. But in the meantime, we need to be able to coordinate as best as possible. And for those that, feel that they are bound by party lines or what have you, this is the smallest of gestures, which doesn't necessarily speak super loud, that could make the biggest difference in tonight's discussion about these 4 motions, I believe. So it's not a lot, but it does allow somebody to do this work full time, to allow us to continue talking between ourselves. There is so much about this project which has been left up in the air at the moment. I know that the average dive site is expecting somewhere between 100 and 140 truck movements a day. I read the other day that the Rozelle goods yards is expected to be the highest of all, with 517 truck movements a day in and out of that site. That was embedded in the detail of the EIS. It is such a huge document. And we are scrambling to talk about how it's going to affect us locally. And we can share this information and we can connect the dots that maybe council doesn't have the resources to do. But if you can't help us with this small contribution, then it will really go down with the community as a kick in the guts. Okay, we do need this help. This is $50,000. It's not a lot of money. And it is probably the City of Sydney is better resourced, and they can do the glossy campaigns and come up with the alternatives and all that sort of stuff if you feel that that's money not well spent. But this is money well spent. And we're pleading with you on this one. Please deliver on this. This is not political. It is so that we can continue to do what we're doing. Show us that we can believe in you as a council, never mind what politics says.
Any further contributions from the gallery? Councillor Pastor.
Quickly, I just want to say I'm totally opposed to this, as I was with the other funds that were requested. Yes, I understand what it's like when you're fighting something, a community opposing something or wanting something. I slept in a tent on the Hume Highway to try and save the former Western Suburbs Hospital. I didn't ask anybody for funding, myself and the other person. I fought for disabled access at Summerhill Railway Station for years. Letters, submissions, form letters to the then state member. We didn't ask the council for money. There's residents here that fought against the LEP. They fought against the rate rise. They fought against the parking permit policy. They didn't come and ask council for money. When they had the time, they did what they could. They funded themselves up and down the city with submissions, heritage architects, solicitors, everybody else to help them when they were opposed to having their homes forcibly listed as heritage. They did not come to council for funding. If you're fighting this, you believe in what you're fighting for, well, so be it. If we start funding certain groups on one issue, we have to fund every single person that opposes everything that goes on in the state. Why are you any different? I can understand it takes over your time, and don't dare say that we don't care. I heard the bang, 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 bang early in the morning and late at night. I'm near Shandov Street, near Parramatta Road. I put up with it. The same as I put up with my neighbour when he's tiling his backyard or putting his new kitchen in. That's part of life. You have to put up with these things. I really cannot believe this new fashion idea, you must pay us to oppose. You either do it or you don't. And if you win in the end, you'll feel so much better because you did it on your own bat, something you really believed in.
I would like to speak in support of this motion. I see it as being a good augmentation to the dedicated officer we've voted for as part of the Mayoral Minute, much as the officer who currently supports a community campaign from within the City of Sydney does so to augment a community organiser role. Ms Gemmell from the community spoke earlier about how often she gets approached from community members who are so grateful for the support and the advocacy that her group is performing on behalf of residents in Leichhardt. I can say that everyone who's been involved in this community campaign in a visible way has been approached numerous times by residents who are grateful to have that support from within their community. This is something that council can augment, but we can never really replace, because what makes it truly meaningful when that happens is that people realise that it's something different when it comes from within your community. These are your friends and neighbours who are standing up for you and who can really speak to what those impacts mean as a member of your community. But as Ms Gemmell and others have always also said, it is incredibly hard for community members to sustain this on top of their work and personal lives, and often on top of being severely impacted by the project themselves. And I don't think we should be asking them to do so on behalf of the community that we all live in. I also note that having this organiser, because it does, as Mr English noted, or others have noted, taken away a lot of the administrative and really important grunt work of running one of these campaigns away from people who are volunteering for it, is that it's enabled this movement to grow, not just here within the Inner West, but I've also been very heartened to see in recent times much of this campaign extending out into Western Sydney with organisations such as the Penrith Valley Community Unions. That is the kind of initiative that has been enabled by the fact that somebody has been able to dedicate themselves to it as part of their full-time jobs. And the reason I would say it's different when it comes to this campaign compared to some other campaigns, and I don't think it's without precedent for councils to support other community groups and other campaigns, is because this one is so huge in terms of its impact on our community on an ongoing basis, not just during construction, but also during operation, as parts of it might open, and the issues it will cause not just within our Inner West, but also across the state. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to do what we can now before the project is completely signed off, enough to support this.
I think it's a bit much for any councillor to suggest that councils don't resource, fund or assist community campaigns throughout New South Wales or throughout Australia. I think that's part and parcel of what campaigns, what councils do. It's in fact, it's probably one of the highest orders of local democracy for us, is understanding our community and then assisting it where it has concerns, troubles, worries, or whatever.
They don't have the money, they assist them. Call the meeting to order. Please proceed, Councillor.
Yeah. And I think that we should acknowledge that the people involved in campaigns, as Councillor Passos has said, put in their own time, effort, resources, at the cost of what must be hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. If our councils had to support all of that, it would cost us a fortune to do. They put in that time and effort. I've done it. I've run campaigns, you know that, around the table. I've run several campaigns, and I would have put in tens of thousands of dollars of my own time and family time into those campaigns, as the rest of you have done. But to me, what's coming out of the meeting tonight is an issue of trust. We don't seem to trust our community. That's a real worry. And that's a poor tone, I think, that's coming from our council. That is, we've had two decisions tonight where we will give money out to groups or fund things that aren't under our direct control, and we're saying no to it. That's a little bit of a worry. Oh, no, it's about trust. I trust these people very much with the $50,000 in funding for a media campaign, and I trust them very much with supporting it via a community community officer to assist with those. I trust them, and this is why I'm supporting both of those motions, and this is why I will continue to do so right now. And I think maybe this could be an unfortunate evening and sets a bad tone for the new Inner West Council, that unless we have full direct control over it as councillors, we will not be allocating any funds out to our community, to the people who do the hard work and the hard grunt and devote their time and resources. We're going to say no unless a councillor or a council officer has absolute full control and full dictatorship of those funds. Our community aren't going to get it. Poor tone, councillors, and I hope we can stand a bit higher than that in future.
Thank you for that. Further discussion?
Could I ask a question, please? This community organiser has now been funded for at least 2 years. I really, and certainly Ashfield Council supported it in the beginning. Can anybody tell me, or does the Mayor know, or through the Mayor, where are they located when they're actually working? And secondly, how long is this going to go on indefinitely? Is that the plan?
I'll put that as a question to the relevant council officer. I understand the position is actually unfilled at the moment. Is that correct? And how long has it been unfilled? Right, not long. And where was it located? The question is, where was it located?
Yeah, I've only met the community organiser at regular community organiser, what would you say, work program meetings. He's out and about a lot, and as far as I know, his office was at the Nature Conservation Council in the city, but I think he's out and about a lot. That was the impression I had. But as to where he is day to day, I couldn't say.
So no terms of reference for the role, or?
Of course there are. Of course there are.
So, excuse me, sorry. I don't understand why the council officer is being asked questions about a position that the council was only partially funded and that was actually employed through community groups.
Because we have the public servants here to be able to provide independent advice.
Yeah, but they don't know the answers. He worked with us. He didn't work with
No, I'm not going to deny council the opportunity to ask a question through the chair. It's a very long-standing and proper practice.
As long as you don't want writing information.
Councillor Kenner, any further questions? Okay. Any further discussion, councillors? No, I'll make a couple of comments. Firstly, you can go on, please, Councillor Drury.
No, you make it.
Firstly, I want to be explicit, and I know it won't be believed by the gallery here tonight, but make explicit and put on the public record my commitment to having a big political impact on behalf of the council. I'm sure all the other councillors will commit in the same way to building the political campaign against WestConnex and to prevent the worst of the impacts if the project does proceed. It's actually not my view, notwithstanding the fact that there's obviously been some very good liaison with the community groups, that this position has had a big political impact on the debate so far. It's also factually incorrect to suggest that the person who's held this position has been apolitical. The person who held it for about a year was Chris Curl, who is currently listed on the Greens website as their contact for the South Sydney Greens, and who is all over the internet as a major activist for the Greens Party. I don't care about that, but that's just the facts. Just put that on the table. It's not some independent person who's never been involved in a political party. It's someone who was a core activist for the Greens Party and understood, perhaps ran their federal campaign in the seat of Sydney in 2016. So core political activist. I believe that, and I don't believe that outsourcing of positions in this instance or in any other instance should be the first position of the council. I do believe that internally within the WestConnex unit, now that we've got an elected council, we've got a communications team, that we can do a more effective job than this person who was outsourced to the Nature Conservation Council and one of the WestConnex action groups. And I do think that our political position is different to that at the City of Sydney. To be frank, I think it's a bit insulting to suggest to people who served on Leichhardt, Ashfield and Marrickville councils that the city's somehow done a better job. We were sacked from office so the government could give the green light to WestConnex. And it's this community, and I know everyone agrees on this, it's this community which has borne the brunt, not the City of Sydney. So I'd much prefer to see resources located here internally within the council and us all work together to build the campaign rather than having someone externally located at the City of Sydney and employed under the auspices of various external organisations. So I'll be voting against the motion. Councillor Drury, did you want to speak? Councillor Hesse?
Again, a disappointing response from the Labor Party, and I regret, sadly not unexpected, the two decisions to basically refuse to fund, even in a pittance, frankly, to fund the community campaign and to begin to fund a PR campaign against the WestConnex indicate what I said in the previous discussion. This is a surrender document by particularly the Labor Party. I'm sure that all Labor Party councillors are very uneasy about that, but nonetheless, that's what it boils down to. It's very disappointing because this is basically a major sellout of our community. As I said, there is no doubt that Premier Berejiklian will be cracking the champers tonight because she's just had a huge win. She's just had a huge win. This is our community saying we're going to worry about the stack. Well, the stack down at I was part of the campaign against the stack at Torella. That is pumping unfiltered air into the Torella Valley of Earlwood, of Torella, of Bardwell Park every day. It was put in there by the Labor Party, as memory serves. This is you are selling out our community. You're endangering their health. All the rest is really smoke and mirrors, folks. Refusing to fund the support that the members of our community who I've stood next to for the last 3 years, and they are working their guts out. They're not asking for much, but basic support. And that's it. The position's currently vacant. I don't have the faintest idea about what the selection process might have been for the last two people who occupied it. I had nothing to do with it, and I'm sure no one here did. But I tell you what, without that, you derail and undermine the hard work that keeps this campaign going, because everyone who's been here tonight goes home devastated by the withdrawal of support from this council. I'd encourage councillors to all act independently, vote on the merits of this. The merits of this are that we need to support our community. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'm going to put the Porteous-Hesse recommendation.
Right of reply.
Right of reply, of course.
Look,
I think the mayor's just done something rather horrendous, actually. He made a statement that he believed that the position was politicised, and then because he has gone and done his own investigations about an employee of the Nature Conservation Council, who is also in part employed by the Inner West Council, he has, because of the political affiliations of that person, therefore decided that this position will no longer be funded. He has basically completely politicised this, and I think it's actually an appalling statement. I mean, does that say that because I'm a member of the Greens Party, I have no right to be an advocate for any other organisation because I might take my political affiliations into my other job? Does that mean that everybody that's a member of any political party cannot do their job well without bringing their personal politics into it? Of course, everybody knows. We all work in the real world. Many of us are members of political parties, and we all know the line that needs to be drawn between our personal political affiliations and the professional work we do in the workplace. And I think it's an appalling statement that the Mayor has made. And it's also, on the other level, it's an appalling admission that he's made that he actually doesn't respect the community. He doesn't respect the community groups. He's basically trashing us. Be aware. Let's.
You tried this for the last 4 years.
We
and you
are testament.
You need to rethink the strategy.
We are
You've got
testament
22%
to.
of the primary vote.
Stop interrupting, Darcy.
You guys have sledged me all night.
We are
all night.
We are testament to.
It's quite appalling.
The behaviour of this mayor. I thought it was quite telling when we were on break when I just said to Darcy, "How are you going, Darcy?" And he said, "Oh yeah, I'm good because I'm winning." What does that tell you about the person we now have as our mayor?
That I'm more effective at politics than you?
What does it tell you about
Point of order. Point of order.
Of this person?
Would you please debate the issue and not the mayor?
Okay.
No, well, the point is that the mayor.
Councillor Passes.
But the mayor has brought this to the personal.
We'll deal with the point of order from Councillor Passes.
The mayor has brought this to the personal.
We'll deal with the point of order from Councillor Passes.
The point of order is speak to your motion, speak about the 50,000 and why you want it, but why are you having a slinging match with the mayor? What for? He can make any comment he likes off the record. It wasn't in the council meeting. Don't get me wrong, I've got no love for Labor.
I'm going to call the meeting to order.
But please, don't play your games or your past animosities here in this council.
I'm going to call the meeting to order. Call the meeting to order. I'm going to deal with Councillor Passis's point of order. I'm going to withdraw my previous comments, which were expressed because it's been quite an example of sledging tonight, but I apologise for that and withdraw it. Councillor Passis is right. This is an ad hominem attack on my character, which has very little to do with the resolution. Please stick to the relevant motion.
I'm happy to stick to the relevant motion, and I'm glad that you've withdrawn your comments entirely because I was really quite shocked at them. I think it's quite clear that the Labor Party will have caucused on this and decided that they're not going to support it. Of course, you do know that caucusing is illegal, but I'm sure that's not a problem for you.
You booked a room to caucus before the meeting started.
But I think you're making a grave mistake here because, you know, we've got a fantastic community here. We've got extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. All they've asked for tonight is your support, and you have basically slapped them in the face. You know, it's a bit like we're facing David and Goliath. You know, we're David, there's Goliath. We've got a sling there, and all we need is a few stones. And instead, what we're being left with, we're being left empty-handed by this council. And I really feel that this is a very bad move.
Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour of the Porteous-Hesse recommendation? All those against? That's been defeated. I declare the meeting closed.
Shame on you, Darcy. Shame on you, Darcy. You kept us here all this time. Delaying tactics. Shame.
You'll never be a Labour people. Keep this up.
Shame on you, Darcy.
Might get any of these on, sweetheart.
The only way you were going to do it was make a name for yourself by actually standing for something.
You know, when you do state.
It's a shame you don't get out there and do something instead of bloody talking about it. Everybody tell your neighbours what's happening.
Julie, you're a disgrace too.